It is Sunday night in East Lansing, Michigan. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com. Come on in, gather around, file in nicely. Behave yourselves. You don't have to behave yourself. You do whatever you want. You're not in here with me. Do what you need to do. Grab some refreshments. Tell us how you're doing. Tell us which refreshments you're partaking in today. It's a Tuesday night. It's a Sunday night. It's a work night. Don't mean to remind you of that. Maybe some of you have to behave a little bit better than you would normally. But anyway, hey, if this is your first time, you have found Spartan Mag Live. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com. SpartanMag.com is the Michigan State website for Rivals.com. And the way this works is I invited Michigan State fans who are subscribers to our fine website at SpartanMag.com over at the Underground Bunker message board to post questions, and we will field those questions in mailbag form here tonight and have a great time doing it. Those questions were posted earlier today by Michigan State fans at the Underground Bunker message board, which is the church of what's happening now in Michigan State sports. It is the daily narrative on all things Michigan State athletics. That's where you go. That's where you go to find out the breaking news, the breaking information, the hot topics, the water cooler information shared among friends. Not all friends. There's some adversarial things going on there, but everybody's a Michigan State person for the most part. So everybody's coming from that angle. And there's a level of trust that goes with that. Not always a level of agreement. Not always the smoothest, not always the friendliest situation, but we keep things pretty civil. Sometimes the moderators, Ohio Spartan, Andy E., you guys know who you are, do a great job. You guys are like recess attendants out there. Remember recess in 4th grade, 5th grade? Go out there, recess was usually okay. You know, until Craig Miller started coming around and as a 6th grader beating up the 4th graders, then the recess attendant would have to come in and say, hey, Craig, come on, man. You're in 6th grade for your 3rd straight year. Be nice to the 4th graders. SpartanMag.com is not always like that, but once in a while, the recess attendants do have to lay down some law. Hey, it's been a busy day for Michigan State. Busy day for Michigan State sports. A busy week. A lot of things going on. A lot of things to talk about as we count down toward the 2021 football season. Mel Tucker, year number 2 as the head coach, going to be starting real soon. August 4th is when football camp begins. Earlier this week on Friday, I was down in Indianapolis for Big Ten Media Days. We have continuing coverage from Media Days going on right now at SpartanMag.com. We've been rolling out stories. Paul Konendijk and I, for the last few days, have more stories to go as we type in quotes, put them together in stories, put those out there for the Michigan State fans who are subscribers to SpartanMag.com. And if you're not a subscriber to SpartanMag.com, get with the program. We would like for you to consider becoming a subscriber, taking in new subscribers all the time. More and more as the website grows. We appreciate the support we get. Appreciate the support we've had over the years. Go over to SpartanMag.com, become a subscriber. You can do it right now. Try it a month. Try it for free. And if you're watching this nonsense, you'll grow to love it. You'll become a Spartan Magger. You'll become addicted. And you'll be a better person for it. In the meantime, give us a thumbs up here on this particular program. Subscribe to this website, this channel. We appreciate that also. Big Ten Media Days down in Indianapolis was interesting. The first time it's been in Indianapolis, it's usually in Chicago. This year it was at Lucas Oil Stadium, the site of the Big Ten Championship game. Been there twice. Many of you have been there also. It's good to be down there. Chicago, I miss Chicago a little bit. Everybody knows Chicago is a great place. It's a stimulating place. It feels like football when you get this time of year going down there. Mixing with all the mascots. No mascots this year. Keeping it lean, the Big Ten was. No fans, no kickoff luncheon this year. Next time, I assume they'll have a kickoff luncheon again, and I assume they'll move it back to Chicago. But it was pretty good in Indianapolis this time. I thought Mel Tucker did a good job talking to the Michigan State fans, and that's who coaches are talking to when they're at those things. They're talking to their fan base, talking to their shareholders, their stakeholders, letting them know what's going on. And, of course, everybody is going to be positive and optimistic in an environment like that. And Mel Tucker was positive and optimistic. And last year going 2-5, once again, not giving any excuses about the way that season unfolded. And he's full blast forward, believing he's going to get the culture continue to get the culture established and get Michigan State rolling at some point. I don't want to say they're a year away or 2 years away. I think they can be competitive this year. But in terms of getting where he wants them to be, probably going to be really hard to do that right now. A question that I posed to him during the podium session that you may have seen if you watched it on Big Ten Network was, you've got 34 new faces on the team, 34 new scholarship players. That includes 15 scholarship transfers, 19 incoming recruits, 34 out of 85 new players. They do feel they've improved the roster athletically. I do too. But when you have that many new faces, what does that do to the chemistry of the team? How quickly can you get everybody to buy in, be on the same page, and have the type of camaraderie and same pageness you need in the ultimate team sport, college football, tackle football in general? And he feels that, the existing players welcomed the players with open arms, and that has helped. But really, it's going to take a while, I think, for them to come together as a team. They'll get 3 weeks of training camp, whatever it is, 3.5 weeks. Then they play Northwestern, open up the season in Evanston. Is that a 9 o'clock kickoff in Evanston? Big Ten Network on Friday night. That'll be Labor Day weekend, Friday. Ready or not, time to go for that one. I think by midseason, if they keep everything together and people are healthy, I think they could be a pretty good team. Not sure what the record will be by that time. This team would be better served opening the season against a Youngstown State, against an Akron, work out some kinks, go down to Miami in a challenging situation, get beat possibly by Miami, the preseason Coastal Division favorites in the ACC, then come back, then play Northwestern. Could come out of that 4-1 feeling good about yourself. Instead, ready or not, got Northwestern. He's not worried about that. He says the schedule is the schedule. He's not an excuse guy, even keel guy. I'm an excuse guy. I don't know if I'm an excuse guy or an explanation guy. I've seen a lot of good teams, a lot of good seasons that the order of things can upset the apple cart a little bit. And this is the type of team that needs some good positives early to get rolling. Dantonio in his early seasons, the way their schedule built, they went from weaker team to a little bit better team to Notre Dame and then a weaker Big Ten team. 3 or 4 of the seasons began that way, and that enabled them to get some momentum, get some confidence, and that helps. This team will not be afforded to that, nor are they asking for that. So Big Ten Media Days were interesting. We'll talk a little bit about that. Also, Saturday, I stayed down in Indianapolis, just north of Indianapolis, Westfield, Indiana. Went to the Under Armour Finals. It's the final tournament of the grassroots season for the Under Armour teams, not to be confused with the Nike teams that were in North Augusta, South Carolina for the Nike Peach Jam. Different shoe companies, different tournaments. This was the Under Armour team, Under Armour tournament. Why was I there? Well, there were 2 very important Michigan State basketball recruiting targets playing there. Jaden Schutt, a 6'5" shooting guard out of Yorkville, Illinois, a top 150 guy that I think is a top 50 type of talent. And Isaac Trout, 6'9" power forward from Grand Island, Nebraska, ranked number 61 player in the country. Trout, he's down to Michigan State, North Carolina. Creighton's in there, Nebraska's in there, somebody else. Notre Dame's trying to get in there. Virginia. I think it's Michigan State and Virginia right now. He's taken 4 official visits. The thing resets, I think, on August 1st or September 1st, and he can have 5 more visits. He told me yesterday that he may go ahead and revisit some schools he's already visited. So he could come to Michigan State again. Could go to Virginia again. Notre Dame coming on strong there as well. Looked pretty solid. Jaden Schutt, his team won the championship today. So congratulations to Jaden Schutt, the 6'5" shooting guard out of Yorkville, Illinois. Today they beat Riverside Hawks 65-53. Riverside Hawks out of New York. I think that program used to be Riverside Church. Maybe not. New York Riverside Church was an Adidas team for years. Not sure if that's the same program or not. Anyway, they met in the championship game today. I saw Schutt play in the quarterfinals against the team from Tennessee on Saturday. Then the semifinals, they were victorious again. against West Coast Elite. And then today, 65-53 over Riverside Hawks. Jaden Schutt, the Michigan State target. 21 points, team high. 6 out of 18 from the field, 6 out of 15 from three-point range. 21 points. Now, he began the game making 3 early three-pointers in a row. I don't know if it was in a row, but it was early. Staked his team to an 11-8 lead. Made another one 19-10. At that point, he had 4 three-pointers, and his team was up 19-10. At that point, he was 4 out of 6 from the field, 4 out of 5 from three-point range in the first 6 minutes. I'll say it again. 4 out of 5 from three-point range in the first 6 minutes. Team was up 19-10. They were up around double figures most of the way. And this is a Riverside team that was athletic, denying passing lanes, following him around as a shooter all the time, up in his grill immediately. So all those three-pointers that he attempted, they were a quick release. He had no time, no space. He's very adept and proficient and veteran, like a veteran player, coming off screens and getting the shot up and out quickly, or off the dribble, or off the jab step. The three-pointer that gave him a 19-10 lead, that was in transition. It was a quick pull-up. He's such a good shooter. He's had those defenses at him his whole career that he's had to become a quick release shooter, and he can do that. Good athlete, too. One time he went up for a dunk. He missed the dunk, but I was impressed that he just went up and challenged a dude in traffic, and the dunk came off the rim, didn't finish it, but I was like, whoa, okay. I've compared him to Matt McQuaid in the past athletically. Remember McQuaid as a mature 22-year-old senior against Duke in the regional finals in Washington, D.C., 2019, dunking in transition against the Blue Devils. Really got the Spartans going that day. Now, could McQuaid have made that dunk as a high school senior before his high school senior year? I don't think so. I saw McQuaid play in Duncanville, Texas as a high school senior when we were down there for the Cotton Bowl in 2015. 2016, 2015, one of those years. I don't know if it was the year they played Baylor or the year they played Alabama. Anyway, down there in Dallas for the Cotton Bowl, went and saw McQuaid. McQuaid, he's pretty good back then. Ended up being a very good college player. McQuaid, 6'5", has a little more core strength than Schutt. Schutt, as good of an athlete as McQuaid was, I think Schutt's a little better athlete. I saw that today. He moves with a little more fluidity. McQuaid was excellent, but McQuaid a little bit stiff. McQuaid became a pretty good ball handler. You remember how McQuaid would share the ball and be a lead guard, and he could play some point guard here and there. Very much the same with Schutt with this Illinois Wolves team. Sometimes he would bring it up and be a lead guard. Most of the time he's coming off screens as a shooting guard. Long arms on Schutt, jumps well. He looks like one of those old-time Duke guards. McCaffrey, Collins, those type of guys, except more athletic. Shire, I know Shire's the head coach at Duke now. I'm surprised Duke hasn't offered him earlier because he looks like a Duke guy. That's probably why Izzo loves him so much. If Krzyzewski were still the head coach, Duke just offered this week, by the way, Schutt. They offered Schutt. If Krzyzewski were still the coach, that'd be tough because Krzyzewski almost never lost a Chicago area recruit. Definitely didn't lose any to Michigan State, right? So the timing for Michigan State to get this kid is good because Krzyzewski's retiring. But anyway, Jaden Schutt was certainly interesting this weekend. So I was checking that out, and I watched their title game today. It was streaming, so I forked over the $20 and watched the game streaming, their championship game today, took notes. And also, after it was over, I talked to Jaden Schutt a little bit. And we expect to have a story on that at SpartanMag.com later tonight. That finished up around 1 o'clock, 1:30. I couldn't write the story right then. I had to put out my sunscreen, go over to Michigan State camp. The last football camp of the year for Michigan State. I was over there. Mel Tucker, I don't know, they had a couple hundred players. They had a pretty good group over there. Watched a little bit of the proceedings over there. Dante Moore was there. Dante Moore, terrific, big-time quarterback. He's going to be a junior this year at Detroit King. And there's Tucker right there at camp. That's what it looked like earlier today. Dante Moore, I've seen him in a few camps. That's the guy that Harbaugh offered a scholarship to when he was like in 8th grade or whatever. But the guy's warmed up to Michigan State. This was the first day that they could have the dead period ended. They could get players back on campus. First day, and he was at Michigan State today. He was at camp, and he wasn't just touring around. He was on the field, had the cleats on, was going through the drills, taking some coaching. Quarterbacks coach, offensive coordinator Jay Johnson working with him. Dante Moore is like a national top 50 type of guy. Seriously, a type of guy that you might see Clemson and Ohio State go after firm and hard. Michigan offered him in 8th grade. I've seen him in the room. I've seen him in a room, Dante Moore, with Mel Tucker and Jim Harbaugh. And he hugged Mel Tucker. Harbaugh was talking a little bit. I'm just a fly on the wall. It was in Big Rapids, Michigan at a camp a couple months ago. I'm just telling you what I saw. And he was at camp today. And I think Notre Dame could get in there. But I think he's giving Michigan State a real long look. I think he's intrigued. I think he likes Mel Tucker. I think there's a lot of recruits out there that like Mel Tucker a little bit. And if they start winning, if Mel Tucker starts winning, be careful. Anyway, it's a lot of fun out there at camp today. Some interesting offensive line recruits. They had a bunch of international guys also. But all right, enough about that. We can talk a little bit about that. We're going to go to the mailbag and start rattling off some questions. Feel free to post some questions over here in the chat area, wherever that is. We'll get to those as well. I don't know if we will open up the phone lines today or not. Maybe we'll do it tomorrow. We got a busy week. I've got a personal busy week coming up Tuesday, Wednesday. Doing some coaching. Season's almost over. Tuesday, Wednesday, then a tournament this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So Monday, maybe we'll turn this thing back on again, open up the phone lines and do it 2 days in a row, Spartan Mag Live 2 days in a row, just to get ready for camp. Maybe we'll do that. Maybe we will. I got to check my schedule. Can't do it on Tuesday. Can't do it on Wednesday. Can't do it Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But maybe tomorrow. Maybe Monday. We'll see. Anyway, let's go over to the mailbag. And feel free to put some questions over here, making sure we still have... Yep, sound is working. Everything's looking okay. Question number 1. This comes from MSU Spartan 777 out of New Hudson, Michigan. He says, what is your biggest takeaway? By the way, this is what I wore to camp today over at Michigan State football camp. Had my Rivals.com shirt on. It was good to see some old friends. Saw Rico Beard over there doing his thing. He was over there. Jason Killip doing a great job. He was out there. I want to give a shout out to Jason Killip, Kenny Jordan, Noah Sprunger, Paul Konerdijk, and the cast of thousands over at SpartanMag.com. And recruiting analyst emeritus Matthew Dorsey. He's still snooping around the chicken coop. He's still snooping around. You might see him pull a John Cena one of these days. Anyway, MSU Spartan 777 from New Hudson, Michigan says, what is your biggest takeaway about the Spartans from the Big Ten meetings? Biggest takeaway. There's Mel Tucker. That's what he looked like in Indianapolis earlier this week. Biggest takeaway. I thought about it. There's Konerdijk and I had a 37-minute VCast from Lucas Oil Stadium. Put the camera on, and he and I talked about the things that we observed at media days. Tucker just kind of, doubling down on all of the talking points that he's had since he was hired about toughness, establishing the culture. He says the culture is being established. And he's a guy that knows how things get built. I mean, he knows football. He knows X's and O's. He knows programs. He was there day one with Barry Alvarez in Wisconsin. He was, I think, here at Michigan State day one with Saban. If not day one, it was the second or third year. He's talked about how many times he's been involved in year one of a program. He was at year one with Nick Saban at LSU. And he's year one at Georgia with Kirby Smart. He has seen it at the highest levels, state-of-the-art levels in college football. He knows what it's supposed to look like. He knows how to coach. On a micro level, as a former coordinator in the NFL, an interim head coach, as a DB's coach for Alabama. You think that's pressure? Coaching DBs at Alabama? Was hired by Nick Saban 3 times. Coach for Jim Tressel at Ohio State. Won a national championship at Ohio State. Won a national championship at Alabama. Almost won one as a coordinator at Georgia. He knows the game. He's a combination of old school and also modern thinking. You can see what Michigan State's been doing in terms of social media outreach, the graphics, the creative department, I think is what he calls it. What they've done stepping forward in terms of strength and conditioning and nutrition. So he's very much new school, but he's very much old school, very much Tressel, Saban, old school, very much Cleveland, old school. He's a Cleveland guy. The Cleveland comes through. And he's a salesperson. He's a lot of things, man. He's got some talent. He's got some ability. He's got some know-how. He's got some personality. He's got some charisma. When he's around these recruits, they like him a lot. And if he starts winning, watch out. Watch out. Anyway, biggest takeaway is just him continuing to be himself. I think he's getting more comfortable in the press conference situation, because if you see him off the podium and just mixing with people, he's got a lot of charisma and personality. He's got a big personality, commands a room, yet he's approachable. Some of his earlier press conferences, that didn't quite come through. It didn't come through on Zoom a whole lot. Those of you that have been around him and met him in person, he's probably just watching his step at like a new coach has to. But I thought his message was pretty good. But in terms of takeaways, I got to say, I asked Drew Beasley. Drew's been around for 6 years. He came to Michigan State as a walk-on. He's been part of, he was part of the 2017 team? He was, he's a reserve back then. But that was a team that went, 10-3 and won the Holiday Bowl, ended up in the top 20, top 25. He's been around some good teams, been a part of some good teams, been a part of some 500 teams, been a part of some teams that have struggled. He's been a part of a lot of teams. So I asked him in that regard, you've been a part of a lot of teams, good ones and mediocre ones. What does this team look like to you? And he could have said, oh, we look great, but he didn't. He just sat there and thought, and he basically said he wasn't sure. He was looking forward to it, but he said he wasn't sure. And that's as honest as you can get. And that's honestly where we all are as observers of Michigan State. We're not sure. With all the new faces that we're going to see on the team, at quarterback, probably right tackle or left tackle, maybe both corner positions, at least one of the linebacker positions, probably the starting tailback. Man, it's hard in the ultimate team sport to have that many new faces come in and have everything come in so seamlessly. But that's what Tucker is striving for. And maybe they'll achieve some of that. My biggest takeaway is that Drew Beasley, a very reputable, credible, respectable Spartan dog, wasn't sure. I thought that was a good, honest answer. Maybe he didn't want to put pressure on his teammates. Maybe he wouldn't like me saying that here, them quoting him saying that he wasn't sure. But he was honest. But you can tell he's eager to get rolling again. And he's become a pretty good defensive end. He's going to be improved. And he's joined by Drew Jordan from Duke, a guy with 9 career sacks that was 285 in the spring. Now he's down to 255. I think he played 280 at Duke last year. He's thinner and quicker. So is Drew Jordan going to be a better pass rusher than maybe I anticipated? Jacob Panashuk, I think he will be a better pass rusher. Those are defensive ends, and I think they're going to be pretty good at defensive end. I'm not sure they've got like a tail-kicking, difference-making defensive end, but I don't think they've got a weakness there in defensive end. But anyway, that's one of my takeaways. And MSU Spartan 77 asks, which position group do you expect to excel the most, and which do you expect to be the most improved over last year? Which position group excel the most? I'm thinking wide receivers. I'm going to send out a tweet here, by the way. I'm thinking wide receivers. You've got Ricky White back on the roster. Was not there in the spring. Jaden Reed, quality wide receiver. Trey Mosley, I think, is ready to take a step. And Jalen Naylor. They brought Jalen Naylor to Indianapolis. He's always been an excellent athlete, but he's in even better shape now. So I'm thinking wide receivers. You've got Ricky White back on the roster. Was not there in the... Sorry about the feedback there. Just trying to find a link to this thing. So I think wide receiver is good. I think that's the best position group on the team. And that should be refreshing for Michigan State fans, because offense has been kind of thin and kind of lean in recent years, as you guys all well know. But I think I'll go with wide receiver. And he says, which area will be the most improved? I think it's got to be offensive line because it was bad last year. I think they've got an excellent offensive line coach and a lot of veterans coming back that individually at some point have played pretty decent football. Now they've got to get it all woven together. And you hear good things about those offensive linemen. A.J. Arcuri's up about 20 pounds. Matt Allen's up 15 pounds. Horst is doing well, and I think you're going to see Horst very good chance at left tackle, which could move Arcuri to right tackle, which I think moves Jarvis back into right guard. Xavier Henderson was asked who are the most underrated players on the team, and he mentioned Kevin Jarvis. That's a guy we've seen the last 3 or 4 years. He's battled some injuries, but that guy was honorable mention All Big Ten as a true freshman 4 years ago. Played right tackle out of necessity last year. Everybody knows guard is his natural position. If he still stays healthy and Horst is good enough and Arcuri is good enough and they're healthy and Jarvis is able to move back inside to guard as a fourth-year senior, finally healthy again, okay. I gained some traction there. So I think offensive line has the most ceiling to improve because they struggled so much last year. But I also think they've got some individuals that can get her done. Matt Allen played a little bit in the opener against Rutgers last year. Did not look good. Was playing hurt. Was injured. Michigan State lost. He didn't play again the rest of the year. Came back as a sixth-year senior now. And he was with the first group in the spring scrimmage ahead of Samac. And Samac's a pretty good player. Samac's played a little bit, been solid, functional at center. I think he could be a good player later in his career. But if Allen starts ahead of Samac, we know what Samac is. Maybe it's time for Matt Allen to finally harness some of his skill and talent and put forth the type of season that you know that he wants to have. He's a good, team-oriented, conscientious guy, leader. He wants to do well. He wants his body to stay together so that he can perform. 15 pounds heavier. If he gets that starting nod, that's a good sign. Put him out there with Jarvis and Duplain inside. Yeah, and I like Kapilovic. Offensive line, that's got to be the answer. That's the most... needs to be the most improved area. Maybe it could be quarterback if you count in comparison to Rocky Lombardi. Nothing against Rocky Lombardi, but if Peyton Thorne or Russo come out and are, quite good to quite good, plus quarterbacks, there's a lot of potential there that if they do well, that could really, that could be a big gap from compared to what we saw last year at the quarterback position. Now I've got a tweet real quickly right here. Got to watch my language there. That was almost foul. All right. We're live right now via Spartan Mag Live. Thanks for waiting. Sorry about the camera shaking there. Sorry about that. Let's go to question number 2. This is from Matt from Ravenna. He says, is Chase Klein going to play linebacker or defensive end this year? Well, Chase Klein is listed as a linebacker. He's up 10 pounds to 245. Put on that weight, I would imagine, because they've got some good linebacker talent coming into the program. You got Crouch coming in from Tennessee, Van Summeren coming in from Michigan, Tank Brown coming in from Minnesota. Noah Harvey still in there slugging it out. I think he's got a chance to have a better year and continue to improve. Chase Klein's been on the cusp of being a starter. Might have even started technically a couple times last year. He's been a playmaker, runs around pretty good. Now 10 pounds heavier to compete with these other linebackers. 245, that's decent. That's almost defensive end size. But he's listed as a linebacker for now. That's all I know. Question number 3 from WX Spartan. From the banks of the Saginaw River, he says. He says, why has wide receiver recruiting been so weird this year? He says, it seemed like Thomas and Gates were 2 top targets. Now all of a sudden there's rumblings that they are not takes. Okay, Thomas is Kevin Thomas, 4-star wide receiver from Philadelphia. Gates is Dantonio Gates Jr., the son of the former San Diego Chargers All-Pro tight end. Gates is a DB wide receiver. 3-star out of Dearborn, Fortson, I believe it is. And there's some rumblings that Gates is inching toward Michigan State now. He has for a while, but that thing's looking better for Michigan State. And Gates is a good talent. He'll be the first to tell you that he needs to keep improving his speed. But you have a guy like that that's got those kind of bloodlines and that kind of talent. When they get to a college and are involved, and then are in a a training environment that is 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, almost 365 a year, just training, improvement. When you get guys like that with that kind of talent, put that kind of training and that type of regimen into their life, they can really they can really make some gains. I'm thinking about, you look at Michigan with basketball, with Hardaway, Robinson. You get those bloodlines, it's a thing. It's a thing. And Gates needs to improve himself, get in a little better shape, I think. I think he'd be the first to admit that. I talked to him a little bit about that in Big Rapids. But there's a chance there's a pretty good diamond in there. But he's got some work to do. He's not a can't-miss prospect. Michigan State likes him. So Michigan State making some decisions there. The Thomas kid, he's listed at 6'3". There's some questions about that. I spoke with Thomas today. He's supposed to be making his decision on July 28th. He's taking official visits to Michigan State and West Virginia. He spoke with Michigan State tonight, just a couple hours ago. So Michigan State still likes him. Now, might he take more visits in the fall? Let me see here. I just sent a couple questions to him. Let me see what I've got. His top 5 are Florida, Texas A&M, Nebraska, Michigan State, West Virginia. He says the schools in my top 5 have been recruiting me for a while now, and I have a good feel for the programs now, so I feel like I'm ready to make a decision. He said he knew which school he wanted after he compared the schools and talked to his parents about it. So I'm thinking Michigan State and West Virginia. Those are the ones he visited. And Michigan State's still in the middle of it. And that's a 4-star guy. If Michigan State gets him, it'll have an impact on the rankings for what that's worth. Interesting recruit there. Question number 4, Spartan MD from sunny West Bloomfield, Michigan. He says, what are your thoughts on Big Ten expansion? Big Ten expansion, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't think the Big Ten saw this coming. So the Big Ten, with Texas and Oklahoma, so this happens. So now does the Big Ten respond? The Big Ten, going back to when Jim Delaney was there, the Big Ten has always wanted to have the best, richest TV deal. That's the big measuring stick contest among conferences. And the Big Ten has had the best deal most years, all the time. So now the SEC has 16 schools. They're adding those 2 schools. And let's see, is my sound fading out a little bit? I don't want to touch this thing because it might just turn off. I'll look to see what people say. Anyway, is Warren going to be like Delaney? Is he going to continue to strive to have the best? I'm going to touch this thing, see if it's a little bit better. There we go. I think that's better. Is he going to be as driven to have the best TV contract the way Delaney was? Is Warren going to be that way? If so, they cannot have a better contract with 14 compared to the SEC's 16. Just can't. And you don't want to go out and add Kansas and whoever else. How much would that help the TV deal? And then instead of dividing it up among 14 schools, you're dividing it among 16 schools. So you could end up with a smaller piece of the pie for everybody. You don't want to do that. So if the Big Ten wants to keep pace with the SEC in terms of having the best TV contract, the only way I see that possible is some combination. The only schools available that can possibly give you that are way away from the Midwest. If you wanted to break up the Pac-12. Do you want to break up the Pac-12? The Big Ten and the Pac-12 have had a great relationship over the years. There were rumors that USC and UCLA had reached out to the Big Ten. I don't know how true that is. You had USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, Stanford. If you have Stanford, you had Cal too, or would they rather be independent? I don't know. Is there a Big Ten West and a Big Ten Far West division? I'm just spitballing here, but if you have Stanford and USC, could you bring Notre Dame back to the table? Do you want to bring Notre Dame back to the table? Now that they're going to 12-team playoff, does that make Notre Dame feel like they definitely don't have to join a conference now? Is that what happens to Notre Dame now? They joined the ACC during the COVID year. They're starting to inch toward possibly, maybe they would consider being a conference team. Maybe. They don't want to. But if Notre Dame sticks in the ACC, they're going to start looking around, and there's going to be SEC schools that are bringing in more money than they are. I mean, Notre Dame could look at themselves in the mirror and say, look, okay, Mississippi State's bringing in more money than Notre Dame. Can Notre Dame be comfortable with that? Or they can just say the word and join the Big Ten and whatever conglomerate and cartel that the Big Ten wants to put together. Notre Dame has a good relationship with USC and Stanford and Boston College. You want a big TV contract? Add USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, Stanford, Notre Dame, Boston College. And what you're heading toward, 2 super conferences, an AFC and an NFC in college football. Is that what we're going to see? I don't know. Or is there going to be 3 of them? I don't know. The Pac-12 network has been a disaster. Those schools are not bringing in a lot of money for themselves. If they want to remain viable, they've got to get with a program. That's what Texas saw, in my opinion. I mean, Texas is sitting there, and Texas thinks they're God, right? And they usually have more money than God. But they saw Texas A&M leave, and Texas can feel great about themselves, but whether it's administrators or big-time donors or whatever, when they're out there rubbing elbows with their Texas A&M buddies, their frenemies, out there at the yacht club or the oil club or whatever club they have, probably not Gillies, but when Longhorn people are hanging out with A&M people, you're looking at A&M, and all of a sudden A&M's bringing in more money than you are athletically. Okay. And then you talk about home schedules. Texas, what's your home schedule this year? Billy Bob. And Billy Bob says, well, Longhorns, we're playing host to Texas Tech, Iowa State, Kansas State. You know what I'm saying? Iowa State, Baylor, Kansas State. A&M guys like, oh, yeah, we got Alabama coming to our place this year and LSU. Next year we got Georgia and Florida coming to our place. Longhorn Bob looks at Billy Bob and says, how do I get, why aren't we like that? Why aren't we making their money? Why don't we have a schedule like that? Boom. Join the SEC, and they'll have that. So, does Notre Dame at some point look around and say, how come we're not making as much money as Mississippi State? It's not there yet because they still have that great NBC deal, right? I don't know what all the figures are, but they stay, that's a good deal there. And they're going to put pressure on NBC, I would imagine, to give them money that is comparable to what other schools are getting. And when Notre Dame started that deal with NBC, Notre Dame was getting a lot more money than anyone else for TV. But then that kind of evened out as new contracts were formed in the Big Ten Network and things like that. So now Notre Dame will NBC keep ponying up to Notre Dame in that regard? I imagine so, but maybe not. And at some point, will Notre Dame be brought to a table and say, hey, look, you joined the Big Ten or whatever it's going to be called with your friends at USC and Stanford, and we bring in Boston College and all your frenemies in the Midwest. You can either there's going to be an AFC and an NFC in college football, and you can either go down there and join the Southern schools, which that's why they're in line with the ACC, because they want to get down there where the recruits are, and I understand that. Can they still get down there if they're with the Northern Cartel? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. We need to go to SpartanMag.com, the message board, Underground Bunker, and ask Atlanta Spartan, because he is in the television business, the executive. He's an executive. Well, he's privy to those conversations, and I might be all wrong on this stuff, but I don't think the Big Ten saw this coming, so I don't think they had a plan. But if they do nothing, they will end up trailing the SEC in terms of TV money, and they're not going to want to do that. At least Delaney would not have wanted to stand pat. And as a Big Ten person, and you're all Big Ten people, I'm not sure it's a great thing for college football or the Big Ten for all these changes to take place. These are just economic forces that are continuing to professionalize college football. And that's okay, I guess, in some regards. But how many times have I said in some regards today? I'm going to try to stop saying some regards. In some regard, I'm going to try to stop doing that. Rob South says, what are my thoughts on Emoni Bates having Michigan State in his top 8? Rob South says, I expect him to go pro at this point. Do you take anything away from that top 8, or is it just Emoni showing some love? Answer, it's just Emoni showing some love. I don't think Michigan State is seriously recruiting him anymore. They're not pretending that there's a chance they'll get him. But they're on good terms, so he mentioned Michigan State. But I tell you, at this time last year, there was a Michigan State assistant coach who told me at this time last year, he said, and this was before Bates committed, he said, Emoni Bates will not be able to pass up a pro deal. He will not play college basketball. That was at about this time last year before he committed, or maybe 14 months ago. He commits, decommits. Things are changing. I mean, could he play college basketball now with name, image, and likeness? And that's something we talked about last year when, people were saying, well, he could go to Europe or he could go here or there, and he's not going to go to college and turn down that money. Well, now he could go to college, and with his name, image, and likeness, could go ahead and sign with Nike, make a lot of money, and play a year of college basketball. It's possible. Would he circle back and be interested in Michigan State again? Maybe in his mind he's open-minded to it, but I don't think Michigan State's thinking about that. All right, let's go over here to the chat area and all the questions over there. Once again, appreciate everybody participating, and we will have some lovely parting gifts for everybody when this is over. Actually, we won't, but I've always wanted to say that. Now, looks like Eric Iverson was here first. Eric Iverson. Rob South, what's up, fellas? Old Tuck, the bell cow, he was here. Top 3. All these guys tell me earlier, no sound, including Peyton Fleetmeyer. I don't know if Peyton Fleetmeyer, I don't remember him ever asking a question, but I appreciate him helping out there with the sound issues. And because of the sound issues, we were able to get a different starting 5. Rob South is a regular, running the point. Old Tuck in the middle. And today only Eric Iverson. No, Eric Iverson was proud to be first. He's a free agent sniper. He's a gunner. He's on the wing. Peyton Fleetmeyer. That dude's a stretch 4 all the way. And Ben Golf 9. Ben Golf 9 is at the other wing. So that's starting 5. Ben Golf 9 at the wing. Peyton Fleetmeyer is a stretch 4. Old Tuck in the middle. Rob South at the point. And Eric Iverson is your 2 guard. And for Iverson, we'll be setting that single screen along the baseline. He'll be catching and shooting in the corner because he's an Iverson. Jonathan Green says, hey, Jim, checking in from downtown Mason, Michigan. Yeah. Great to be back in Mason. Yeah. They got a nice-looking courthouse there. Not that I've ever been in it. But nice courthouse. That's the county seat, right? Downtown Mason, not far from downtown, they've got an outdoor skating rink. But all the outdoor skating rinks around the Lansing area, they've kind of gone to pot a little bit, so to speak. Cracking and can't really get out there and do roller hockey on them. Mason's not bad. Not far from here. Ronnie says, Jim, Flow Magic 20 says no sound. We got that fixed. Matthew Johnson says, good evening, folks. All right. It's hearing impaired night, says Tim D. Old Tuck. Old Tuck says, I run rim to rim like Steve Scheffler. See, Old Tuck knew he was going to be in the middle. Steve Scheffler, the old big burly center from Purdue, back in 1990. He was battling down low with Mike Peplowski when Michigan State won a share of the Big Ten title at Breslin Center the last game of the regular season. Some of you may have been there. Fans stormed the court. It was a big deal. Michigan State a share of the Big Ten title for the first time since 1979. Peplowski, I think, was a freshman that year, right? Scheffler was doing his thing. That's back when Purdue would have those muscle man centers. Steve Scheffler, Rowinski a few years prior to that. Matthew Johnson says, Comp never reads the chat. I did this time, though. I caught it early enough. Only had about 2 minutes of dead air. But you're right. Usually I would have not have known until it was too late. All right, Old Tuck says, remember when he squared off with Peplowski in that championship game? I just talked about that. Me and Old Tuck. Right here. Me and Old Tuck. Angelo Gross, Harold Joyner, enthusiast, SEC Super Conference. Does anybody remember when the Big 12 was formed? You took the remnants of the Southwest Conference after some of those schools had gotten in a lot of trouble buying players. The remnants of the Big 8 Conference. Big 8 had been pretty good for a while. They took 4 from the Southwest, 8 from the Big 8. I think Arkansas had left to the SEC, right? Big 12 formed the Big 12. Big 8, Southwest, Big 12. The Big 12 was the original super conference. Remember when the Big 12 was a super conference? Man, the Big 12 is going to be strong. You got Oklahoma and Texas in the same conference. Hadn't been like that before. And Nebraska. Super conference. Ironically, it was the first one to fold. It's not folded yet, unless you count the Big East. It's not folded yet, but it's getting blasted wide open. And the shrapnel's going to end up with some of those schools. Iowa State, who's a pretty good football program right now. Kansas State, Kansas. Well, Kansas is going to land somewhere with their basketball program, right? Well, I don't know. But some of those are going to end up in the American and a glorified leftover conference, I think. Terrence says, laughing out loud, I'm sure whatever comp was said while the audio was profound. It was. My initial opening was outstanding. The part you didn't hear was amazing. And there were some Wall Street tips woven in there, too. I can't repeat them now. Peyton Fleetmeyer says, time for Michigan State to head to the SEC. Old Tuck says, Old Tuck up in Ludington. Put 5 4-year-old king salmon in the cooler. 15 to 20 largemouth bass, 3 walleye, 6 perch, several bluegill, and pumpkin seeds. Did you really, Old Tuck? Are you in Ludington now, or are you back home in Austin? So you're out in Lake Michigan, I'm taking it, because you're a Lake Michigan guy. And you had 5 king salmon. Now, people, if you haven't seen the king salmon that come out of Lake Michigan, they're like this. And they're kings. They're big. Now, the salmon numbers have been down in Lake Michigan. They've been down. I don't know. I'm not sure why. The alewives numbers are down. That's what they usually eat. And the DNR's been planting more lake trout now up there. That's more lake trout. And lake trout, they get like this. They get like this. The lake trout. But my man Old Tuck is out there offshore in Ludington with 5 4-year-old king salmons, which are probably like this. You kept the largemouth bass. You kept them. You know, you just hook you through the largemouth bass back, right? You're not eating those things. But you got 15 or 20 of those. I didn't know largemouth bass was a big thing in Lake Michigan. 3 walleye. Lake Michigan's not really known for the walleye. Walleye is more Lake Erie and Saginaw Bay and Lake Huron. And some of the inland lakes. 6 perch. Perch used to be great in Lake Erie. Still solid down by Toledo. And Fishin' Dave will tell you that. Fishin' Dave doesn't come here, but he posts on the Underground Bunker about fishing in the Toledo area. 6 perch, several bluegill, and pumpkin seeds. I'm still not clear the difference between a bluegill and a pumpkin seed. Pumpkin seed's a little bit lighter color, something like that. They look the same to me. They both have a bluegill, don't they? Anyway, but Old Tuck was killing it, apparently. Proud of you, Old Tuck. Back up. Sounds like you're back up from Texas and enjoying the world's greatest freshwater fishery. Jacob Terry says, go green. Matthew Johnson says, what's been happening with Gates Jr.? Seemed like an MSU lean for a while that apparently wasn't the take. Then today there was some CBs to MSU. Well, Antonio Gates talked about it earlier. A lot of talent, but there's a diamond in there. It needs to be pressurized and brought along. So if you're recruiting him, you're like, okay, is he you know, is he going to respond to what's needed, what needs to be done in a program like this? And if so, what's he going to look like? Because he's not a can't-miss guy right now. He's not, no recruits are a finished product, but so he's got some tantalizing ability, but a ways to go. So Michigan State's been in on some other receivers. They like him, but it's not like you hold the program for him. But now, Michigan State's doing well with him, so he was a lean. And then, when you say apparently wasn't to take, I don't know. That stuff, hard to say. So I posted about it on the bunker today. There's some things that happened. There's some communication that's happened, and that one's warming up a little bit, basically, is what's coming down. But it's an interesting one because everybody knows who Antonio Gates Jr. is. 3-star recruit. People know who he is because of his father. Of course, his father came to Michigan State for about a year when Nick Saban was here. Nick Saban wanted to turn one of the greatest tight ends in history into a linebacker. So even the greatest of all times, sometimes misses. I remember being in his office when Antonio Gates was playing in Magic's Round Ball Classic at the Palace basketball national all-star game. And I was in there with Grinzel and some other guys. And Saban was like, "Did you go to the game? Is he really actually any good at basketball?" He was like a 6'4". Is that what he was? 6'4". Kind of an Anthony Mason, kind of a rotund point forward type of guy. Could handle the ball real well, create for himself, dish it to others. Played for the Michigan Mustangs under Norm Odin. That team went to Las Vegas and won the Vegas Big Time National Championship, which was a 64-team tournament at that time, which combined Adidas and Nike teams. And a couple years there, the Mustangs, they won it one year, and then they kind of came in second the next year. That's around the time they had Jason Richardson, Desmond Farmer, Tolbert was in around that time. Gates. So anyway, Gates played in that National Basketball All-Star Game, Magic's Round Ball Classic, committed to Michigan State to play football, could play linebacker, wanted to play basketball. I don't think Saban was too keen on that, so he left. Junior college, went to Eastern Michigan, then junior college again, I think, and then Kent State, helped Kent State go to the Elite Eight under Stan Heath. I saw Stan Heath yesterday down in Indiana. I hadn't seen him in a long time. He's excited about being head coach at Eastern Michigan. I told him I'll be rooting for him, which I will. Good to see him again. So it's weird, I don't know, it's just good to see him again. All right, so Angelo Gross, Harold Joyner, enthusiast as comp, the Dante Moore hype train, ready to leave the station, or is he SEC bound? Dante Moore is that excellent quarterback for Detroit King that I mentioned earlier. He likes Michigan State enough that he came to camp here the first day of reopening the contact period. Came to Michigan State and had his cleats on and was going through camp, taking coaching. I went inside and watched the linemen a little bit more. I didn't really come out and watch Dante Moore a little bit. It's hard to watch everything. I'd seen him at a couple of camps. I know what he's about. It would have been interesting to watch him interact with the coaches. I think Jason Kilp was watching him a little bit. I'll have to ask around a little bit more about that. But I saw him interact with Mel Tucker at Ferris, and he likes Mel Tucker. He likes him. So, type of guy, if Michigan State starts winning, it's going to help. Michigan State goes out this year and goes 8-4, yeah, they're going to be right in there with him. And he's a talent, man. He's a quarterback talent. Like I said, he might be. I know he's gotten some offers, but do you have an offer, or are people like really, really beating down your door to go to their place? I think he could be a type of quarterback that Clemson and Ohio State are beating down his door to come to their place. And they don't do that with all quarterbacks, but this guy has that kind of talent. And I think he's got a mature disposition about him, too. He's a worker. He's out there working today. A lot of good things about him. All right, let's go back over here to the mailbag. You know what? I don't know if this will work or not. I just got something from Don. I'm not really sure. Oh, there's Don. There it is. The super chat from Don. There it is. And by the way, he's got a personal super chat sponsorship tonight from Don Straight. Really appreciate that. Really, really appreciate that. And if somebody has a personal sponsorship like that, their question goes straight to the top if I see it in time. And I can't find the DJ horn. I used to hit the DJ horn. I can't find it. I lost it during rehearsal. Anyway, ding, ding, ding. Thank you, Don Straight. Appreciate the heck out of that. My man. Last time I tried to find the DJ horn, I ended up with 3 different pictures of myself up here. And that was, started confusing all the Pink Floyd fans out there. Anyway, what I'm going to do is, hold on. I'm going to do that. I'm going to open up the phone lines. We'll see if it works. Might take 1 or 2 calls. We'll see. Let's go out to the mailbag. Karl Marx, the Spectator haunting Europe, asks, he says, I thought it was interesting that you and Paul Konadijk opened up the VCast from Indianapolis with the statement that Michigan State is not getting much respect from the Big Ten media programs. You both seemed taken aback by that. How is this similar to Coach Mark Dantonio's takeover? How is it different? All right. I did mention it was a little bit like that. It was similar that when Dantonio took over, nobody knew who Mark Dantonio was. None of the outsiders did. And I can't really remember where Michigan State was predicted to be. And, of course, this week Michigan State was predicted to finish last in the Big Ten East by the media. And, when Dantonio took over, there were only 11 teams in the Big Ten still. There was no Rutgers, no Nebraska, no Maryland. I'm thinking Michigan State was probably picked 9th or 8th or something like that. Minnesota was at the bottom, the very bottom. And as it turned out, Michigan State went 7-6 in Mark Dantonio's first year. Michigan State went 3-5 in the Big Ten, which put Michigan State in a 4-way tie for next to last in the Big Ten. So technically, Michigan State finished tied for 10th out of 11 in Dantonio's first year. Or you could say tied for 7th. So I just used my abacus to count that. They were 3-5. There were 4 teams that went 3-5. And then Minnesota went 0-8. So 4 teams were 3-5. Michigan State was one of them. So they tied for 7th in the Big Ten or tied for 10th, which was next to last, either way. So that's where Dantonio was in year 1. And Tucker was similar at 2-7. All Big Ten games. All of them were conference games. So, yeah, I don't think the media in the Midwest, I don't think they were really hip to what Dantonio was building. I liked the way Michigan State under Dantonio in the earlier years, they were blocking and they were tackling and they were eliminating mistakes. He took over and he had Javon Ringer, who was one of the top 2 or 3 running backs in the Big Ten. They had Devin Thomas, who had not done much as a junior college transfer in year 1 under John L. Smith. Year number 2, he led the Big Ten in receptions. Mark Dantonio, wide receiver, led the Big Ten in receptions, turned pro early. Jonell St. Deke, a junior college transfer, had not done much in his first year, which was John L. Smith's last year. Dantonio gets him, and he was among the Big Ten leader in sacks. Not necessarily great against the run, but he was a playmaker as a pass rusher. So he took some players and added water, and all of a sudden they were plus players in some ways. That team might have even been better than their 7-6 record. They almost beat Michigan. Michigan was good, had Michigan beat, and then there was that sack fumble that Mike Hart picked up and advanced on a 3rd and long when they were down 10 at the time. Is that what it was? Anyway, so you're asking me, how is this similar or dissimilar to Dantonio's situation? I think it's similar because outsiders weren't really sure what to make of Dantonio. And I think similarly, outsiders aren't really sure what to make of Mel Tucker. Had a mediocre year last year, wins and loss-wise, with a lot of strange things going on.
Call from
Parts unknown.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
We'll go along with it. Parts unknown. Are you ready to play ball? Are you going to be good? What's going on? Parts unknown. Welcome to Spartan Mag Live. We lost him. I think that might have been, he was kind of using an old Tuck type of cadence there, so we brought him in. A couple of times here on Spartan Mag Live, we've had some jerky boys. Usually I can tell who they are, but whatever. Anyway, so what was I talking about? Dantonio's first year? Tucker's first year? So, Tucker's got a heck of a resume. Heck of a resume. I know he only had 1 year as a head coach at Colorado. But if he had, the only thing he was lacking was like 3 or 4 years as a head coach and a couple of top 25 seasons. But if he had his resume, national championship at Ohio State, position coach, national championship position coach under Saban at Alabama, and what he did at Georgia and the NFL.
Call from.
Is this Qualdariani?
I don't know what he said there, so I can't be offended because I don't know what he said. But anyway, that was, I was trying to call that guy back, but he didn't leave a number. Unfortunately. So, Dantonio, so Tucker, if Tucker, NFL coordinator, NFL interim head coach, some good years in the NFL, some very good years in the college ranks. Was he recruiter of the year at Georgia 1 year? If you had all of those things and also 3 or 4 successful years as a head coach, let's say at Colorado, and maybe a top 25 year, yeah, that would be ideal. But guess what? If he had all of that, Michigan State's not getting him. If he had all of that plus 4 or 5 good years at Colorado, he'd be head coach at USC right now or someplace like that. As much as you want to think about Michigan State, as much as high of opinion as you have of Michigan State, that would be ideal, but that would not have been available to Michigan State. I think you would agree. I mean, Michigan State had a chance to get Urban Meyer when he was head coach at Bowling Green. But by the time he did his thing at Utah, Michigan State wasn't getting him. He was going to the Gators. You know what I'm talking about? That's how that works. All right. Question number 7. All right, this is a long one. This one's a thinker. Au Sable River, ladies and gentlemen. I was on the Au Sable Tuesday. Mind my own business. Having a wonderful time. Jay Bannon from Sterling Heights says, how do you feel about... Oh, this isn't the one. The next one's the thinker. Jay Bannon, he asked this last week and I didn't get to it. He says, how do you feel about the 4-2-5 defense holding up to the running games in the Big Ten? He says, I know it works against passing games, but run first is the way a number of teams play. True about that. Let me look something up here. My answer, what was this? All right. I want to go back and rewatch this particular game because it kind of answers your question a little bit. The answer is Indiana. Indiana runs a 4-2-5 defense. They did pretty well last year. And against one particular running team named the Wisconsin Badgers, they held the Badgers to 6 points last year, beat them 14-6. I know Wisconsin did not have a stellar season, but they held Wisconsin to, 140 yards rushing, 4.0 per carry. Wisconsin was not able to throw it was the problem. Well, they threw it for 202. Problem was they turned it over, but they held Wisconsin to 6 points. Yeah, the 4-2-5 defense. It seems to me, Ohio State starts with they start 3 corners and 1 safety, and they can man up with 3 corners against your 3 receivers because they know that 1 safety that they feel like they can lock up, and none of those guys will need extra safety help, and then they stop the run with the standard number. They don't have to put an extra person in the box to stop the run. But that's Ohio State with Ohio State NFL talent. They don't have to put a guy in the box to stop the run. They can play with 4 DBs, even against 3 receiver sets, and still and be strong against the run, because then they still have a standard number in the box. They still have 3 linebackers. They'll have 7 in the box. That is an extra man in the box against 6 blockers if you have a 3 receiver set. That's Ohio State talent. If you have Ohio State talent, you can do it that way. Now, Ohio State, I think they began the Michigan game in a 4-2-5, a nickel defense. Everybody plays nickel on third down, third and long. Some teams are passing teams on 1st and 10. Sure, you start a nickel against some of those teams. Penn State plays 3 linebackers for the most part, but they've got excellent talent too. When you've got Indiana talent, can Michigan State get to that level of having that kind of talent? If they have really good talent and it's a 4-2-5, what does that mean? If one of their corners is really big and can play inside if their nickel is a big nickel, like Angelo Gross was a little bit last year. He's a little guy, but he was big for a corner and plays physical. Now he's going to be a safety. You're always going to have a safety that's a box linebacker like Xavier Henderson at 210 pounds. That's linebacker size for a lot of teams. He comes down and plays at the linebacker level quite a bit. So the 4-2-5 ends up looking like a standard 7-man box sometimes with Henderson in there. So it can kind of vary a little bit. Question is whether you can do that with a safety down in and down out in the Big Ten without wearing out a safety down to the box level. To get that done, sometimes you have to rotate who that box safety is going to be. Maybe it's not going to be the same box safety every single game. Last year, sometimes you saw Person in there. Sometimes you saw Henderson in there. Michael Dowell is going to be the nickel most likely this year, and he's a former corner. I don't think he's quite quick enough to be an actual corner, but is he going to be like a nickel corner who's a little bit more of a hybrid there at the nickel? So you have a hybrid at the nickel, and then you've got a box safety coming in, and you can kind of flip that here and there and create a moving picture there a little bit. Indiana was tremendous on defense last year. Forced so many interceptions, so many turnovers. They were tricky. They disguised things. And they moved things around, and their same pageness was great. They were on the same page, and they just kept changing the questions on you. Their coordinator is left, Womack. Where did he go? He's the head coach now somewhere. He was excellent. As good as they were with takeaways and scoring defense, Indiana was still, I think, number 5 in total defense in the Big Ten. They were a very good defensive team, and they won all those games. Even with Penix missing so many games at quarterback, now he's back and he's a dynamic quarterback. I don't know what they're going to have on defense. I haven't looked at it, but Indiana's good football right now. Got to replace Womack. But Indiana, as well as they did last year, they're number 7 in the Big Ten in yards per carry allowed, which is not great. Michigan State was strange on defense last year. Dead last in the Big Ten in scoring defense, but they were number 5 in total defense in terms of yards allowed. Michigan State was number 6 in the Big Ten in rushing defense at 3.9 yards per carry. 3.9 per carry, number 6 in the Big Ten. Those numbers would not have been good in the Dantonio, Mike Tressel era. Back then, Michigan State's philosophy was to stop the run. They were 4-3, and they would have 3 linebackers on the field for more downs, I think, than pretty much any team in the Power 5. That and the way they played, the linebacker out in the slot against 3 receiver formations. Michigan State was susceptible to the bubble screen, or they'd play off on the slot so that they were susceptible to the slot out or some curls, and you saw it over and over and over against teams like Western Michigan and Baylor, to the point that it drove you guys nuts. I heard you. Why are we giving up 370 yards passing to Western Michigan? The theory was don't give up big plays, getting into the red zone, play tough red zone defense, force field goals. Michigan State had a nightmarish game in a lot of ways against Baylor in that very famous Cotton Bowl back in 2014. And Baylor rolled up 600 yards of offense, whatever it was, and a ton of completions. I went back and looked at it. I think like 17 completions were just the slot, curl and slot out to that open area, that bubble screen area, that overhang area. Michigan State stopped the run, give you that. They took it. and they had a big lead, and Michigan State made some big plays, came back and won the game. But also in the process, Michigan State forced Baylor to attempt more field goals than Baylor attempted in any game all season. That part of it worked for Michigan State. The part that did not work for Michigan State is they gave up like 2 or 3 big play touchdowns. 2 were on trick plays. 1 was a double pass touchdown. That screwed up the concept. And then they had that tackle-eligible trick play touchdown for about 30 yards. Michigan State's thing was make them, if they want to throw underneath, hit them hard, tackle, throw them. Don't let them run. Do not let them run. And Baylor was never able to run. And that all would have worked. Get into the red zone and force 2 more field goals. But it didn't work because of those 2 trick plays. Credit to Art Briles, slimy character, good football coach. He saw that it was going to be tough to get into the end zone, so he wanted to penetrate the end zone with trick plays from outside of the red zone, which is the Bill Walsh concept in some ways, not necessarily the trick plays. But Bill Walsh, the great guru of the 49ers, he was he a Sid Gilman protege? Don Coryell protege? Anyway, West Coast offense originator, kind of. Walsh always wanted to take a shot at the end zone, like 1st and 10 from the 24-yard line. He'd rather, he thought it was easier to hit that post, 24-yard post to Taylor or Rice from 24 yards out than it was to try to, run it and throw short and jam it in from 10 yards, 5 yards, 4 yards, or 15 yards. He always wanted to take a shot, get inside the 30, take a couple shots. Baylor, that day, same thing. They recognized it was going to be hard to penetrate the end zone from the red zone, the way Michigan State would play, because when you got into the red zone, those things shrink up, and now that slot area, which was wide open in the middle of the field, closes in. Like I said, Baylor attempted some field goals that day. But those 2 times, double pass touchdown and the trick play touchdown, Michigan State was on schedule to get it done. Those 2 things mess it up. Now Michigan State heroically, the football gods smiled kindly upon Michigan State, and the way Michigan State did so many things right by the football gods in their program, whereas Baylor was not. And I'll argue anyone on that one. And Michigan State came back with a terrific victory that day in the Cotton Bowl against Baylor. I've gone through that a number of times, but the point still remains. That's how Michigan State played. Michigan State doesn't play that way anymore. So now Michigan State would match up better through the air against that Baylor team, but that Baylor team might be able to run the ball better against Michigan State. Would definitely run the ball better against Michigan State. So Michigan State last year, number 6 in the Big Ten in run defense, 3-point yards per carry. Now, a lot of that is from the remnants of the Dantonio Tressel run stoppers. Will that dissipate as things change over? Tucker's not, Tucker's going to want to remain strong against the run with little different puzzle pieces. 4-2-5, but that 4-2-5 looks like a 4-3 sometimes. But for the most part, they are honoring the pass more so than the Dantonio years. You're asking, can that work in the Big Ten with so many Big Ten teams that'll play run first? Well, how many Big Ten teams are there that'll play run first? Wisconsin? Yeah. Ohio State does everything first. So wherever you are with the RPO stuff, they scratch where it itches. They'll just do the opposite and beat you with whatever you choose. Pick your poison. So can it work? I point to Indiana last year. Indiana did a really good job with it. Minnesota can do both. Minnesota's gotten to the point when they were good 2 years ago, they could play 4-3 against the run, or they could do a 4-2-5. Iowa has stayed steadfast with the 4-3, but they do play more nickel than they have in the past because more teams on offense play, spread it out, spread formations. But for a few years there, Iowa was sticking with the 4-3 even against 3 and 4 wide receiver sets. And they do a great job turning you over. But they would put out those freakish outside linebackers in the slot linebacker. I always talk about A.J. Eds because he was a freak at 6'5" playing linebacker out there. And they play their cover 2 zone or cover 4. And he would do his 45-degree drop. And you're like, that dude cannot cover a slot receiver. And they were just so perfect in their drops and in their areas they were covering. And vision and breaking at the correct time. They just, when they had it going on, they were perfect, and he was good. But Iowa has also done a little less of the 4-3, but they're still principally a 4-3 team. Michigan State was that way, for better or worse. Usually for better, although it drove some of you guys crazy against some opponents, like Western Michigan, Baylor, and many others. But over the course of time, Michigan State's defense was pretty good. There's different ways to play defense. With Hazleton, 4-2-5 for the most part. So, can it work? Worked for Indiana. Wisconsin can do a little bit of both. Wisconsin, over the years, has done a lot of like 30, 3-down linemen, even though the 2-down linemen that you're seeing in football a lot. 2-down linemen and then, 6 in the box with 2 defensive ends and two linebackers. Aranda was there. He was starting to do some of that when he was at Wisconsin. So Wisconsin, if you watch them closely, they're kind of they kind of goof it around, hybrid it around a little bit. So Michigan State is kind of in that category. So can Michigan State do it? Can it be done? I point to Indiana last year, and I point to Wisconsin and Minnesota doing a little bit of both. I think over the course of time, Michigan State will do a little bit of both. But we'll keep an eye on it. So they go out and get Van Sumeren, the big linebacker out of Michigan. Big, thick linebacker. He played for Michigan last year in short yardage and red zone situations. When he came in, they would do a 3-4, an old school middle guard 3-4 when he was in there. So where does he fit with this system? I'm not sure. That'll be intriguing to see. Another question here from Jay Bannon out of Sterling Heights. He says, do you see Michigan State using the transfer portal into double digits again in the next cycle? I'm going to go rewind back to your question about the 4-2-5. I've been wondering that myself over the years. John L. Smith did a 4-2-5, and there was a lot of slippage in that program in a lot of ways. So, I talk about landmark games, and I refer to TCU against Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl 6 years ago, or whatever it was. That was probably 2014, 2012. That was the year Michigan State lost to Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship. That was the year they lost. It was Kirk Cousins' senior year. That Wisconsin team, big bad Brett. Test. Test. Just kidding. Can you hear me now? Let me see myself do this. Can you hear me? Test. Test. This halftime show was brought to you by Pfizer. Anyway, all right. So, forgot what I was talking about. I was talking about Wisconsin against the microphone thing. I apologize about that. That's just ridiculous. I've gotten some other ones, and we are looking at some other things, but I don't know. I don't think it was the cable. I don't know what it was. I'm not going to talk about that anymore. We got just a few more minutes here on this one anyway. But I've talked about Wisconsin and TCU. I know that was years ago, and that was before everybody started doing the RPOs. But that was TCU against Big Bad Wisconsin with Monty Ball. Brett Bielema was one of his final years. Very good Wisconsin team. Lost to TCU. TCU was a 4-2-5 team, the best 4-2-5 team. Patterson, the coach. In a one-game situation, they bottled up Wisconsin. Wisconsin figured it out late in the game and started putting holes on them in the ground, scored. And I can't remember if they went for two or not, but if that game had gone longer or they played again, I think Wisconsin would have had their number. TCU at that time was not a member of the Big 12. I think they were a power. I think they were a group of five, I think they were a mid-major at the time. But TCU showed that that they could. Maybe they were Big 12 at that time, or was that before they gained access in the Big 12? Anyway, TCU at that time could not play against Wisconsin and Penn State and Michigan and Ohio State week after week after week. But in a one-game situation in Pasadena, they were able to bottle them up for 9, 10, 11 possessions and get it done. And that was a very good. TCU was a defensive-oriented team. Patterson was a defensive-oriented coach, and they were 4-2-5, and they beat a great, great running attack that day. I think Wisconsin was a little bit slow and sluggish to figure it out. Texas Christian did a really good job on the outside zone with the inside linebacker Carter, Carder, was kind of insiding out that thing, shooting a gap from behind and tackling things before it could turn the corner. Then Wisconsin started going right at him up the middle a little bit more later in the game. But TCU won that game and proved that a 4-2-5 could beat Wisconsin. Now that's 10 years ago. The game's changed a lot since then. You're asking, can a 4-2-5 win in the Big Ten? TCU did it that night. Some of these 4-2-5s like Oklahoma's had over the years, Oklahoma's not been great at defense, but they've tried to do it. You get in the SEC these days, Saban's gone more to... but when you have great talent, you can't really compare apples and apples. When you have a team like Ohio State and Alabama with NFL players all over the place, they can do it with whatever the numbers are because it takes two people to block their nose guard. It takes two people to block their defensive end. Their corners can play one-on-one and lock people down. So whether they're going they can go 4-3. Your numbers and X's and O's don't really pertain to what they're doing because your people aren't the same. Can Michigan State get to that level? Perhaps. That's what their goal is. So anyway, I don't have a really good answer about whether the 4-2-5 can work, but it worked for Indiana, and like I said, Minnesota and Wisconsin have had success in recent years with a little bit of both. I know everybody wants to be like Ohio State, but you're not going to have Ohio State talent, so you can't always play the same way on defense. But I'll be watching just like you will be to see how this goes, because I'm not sure. I'm not going to say it can't work. Anyone remember when people used to say when Urban Meyer was hired at Florida out of Utah, oh, that offense will never work in the SEC. That won't work in the SEC. Won a national championship. Question, do you see Michigan State using the transfer portal into double digits again next cycle? The answer is no. Not 15. They had to do that. They're revamping the roster. Tucker said this week that there is no baseline number for him in the program. It's not like he's going to come out and say, all right, we're going to use 10 players in the portal every year. Some years it'll be different numbers. He says they're going to be built on high school recruiting primarily. However, he said if they look at a high school recruit, they're not going to reach on anybody. They're not going to take a high school guy because he might be good enough. Because if he's not quite what they want, they know they can just say, okay, we'll go find somebody in the portal. So they want to do it primarily in the high school ranks. To answer your question, it won't be 15 of them like it was this year. Also asked, do you see Michigan State taking a running back in this recruiting cycle with the loaded running back room that Michigan State has right now? It's loaded right now, but don't be surprised. It's so crowded there in this day of college football. There's going to be portal attrition there, I would assume. But no, they're not going to take a running back this year. They liked that guy, Katron Allen. He committed to Penn State. They liked the Alston kid. He committed to Auburn. They were only going for like big time running backs. And didn't get one, so they're okay not taking a running back this year. Question number 8, JR in East Lansing says, assuming they're healthy, he says, I expect the 2 deep at defensive end, he says, will be Jacob Panashuk with Drew Beasley, Drew Jordan, Michael Fletcher. I would assume those 4 also. Panashuk, Beasley, Jordan, Fletcher. He asks, do I think that former running back Brandon Wright could be a dark horse to see a few snaps on passing downs? If they'll try it, yeah, I might give this a try too again. They'll try it, but saw Brandon Wright a little bit in the spring game. He's got a ways to go. Good athlete, was a pretty good running back in high school, played some defense. He's just not quite up to that level. He's not Panashuk, Beasley, Jordan, Fletcher. So, good, solid guy. Unless he looks totally different here real quick, to answer your question, I'm going to say no. I don't expect Brandon Wright to break through. I think that those 4 defensive ends are pretty good, and it's going to be hard to break into that group. But you're asking, could it happen on 3rd downs? That would be the only possibility. Going back a number of years, you might remember when they used Ivory McCoy or tried to make him into a pass rush guy, or even Kellen Freeman Davis. Those guys, as talented as they were, they didn't make that much of an impact. Brandon Wright's trying, I give him credit. But to answer your question, no, I think it's going to be those 4. And then you also asked, let me try this again. Tess. Darn it. So, he also asks, which, could there be a dark horse to see a few snaps? Who else might it be? Jeff Pietrowski, you keep hearing good things about him. You even hear good things about him as a leader, as a young player. Strong motor, down in, down out. Ohio kids. It's always the Ohio kids that come in and get a role quickly. They're coached so well down there. But as he already, a lot of those Ohio kids hit their ceiling quick also. Pietrowski's a possibility. Chase Klein, defensive end, hand in the dirt, possibly. Maybe 2-point stance off the edge. Avery Dunk, keep an eye on Avery Dunk. That's an Ohio kid that's a late bloomer physically. Athletically, he's good, thin. He's added some weight since the spring. I liked his film in high school. I'll be intrigued to see what he looks like now that he's 15 pounds heavier than he was in the spring. All right, this is from MSU DeBest, from Parts Unknown. This is the long one. This was the long one. He says, we're all hoping this is the year the offensive line takes a step, obviously. What was your thought on the offensive line in the spring game? He says, I went back and watched some of the highlights, and to my untrained eye, it looked similar to last year, with guys getting beat often, looking off balance, getting pushed back in the pocket by defensive tackles, or ending up on the ground after a whiff. They were without our Curry, so that didn't help. I think his health is key to a functional offensive line season. He says, overall, wondering if I saw any progress in the spring game or have heard anything from the inside. Again, I don't know what I'm talking about, but that's what it looked like to me. All right, that's from MSU to Best for Parts Unknown. I'll respectfully say that you answered your own question. I think you saw some of that, but I think it was, I don't want to say it was your imagination, but there were some players that were getting beat, but I went back and I took notes on it, and I went back and counted it up. I think there were only 46 offensive plays in the whole scrimmage. So maybe only 25 offensive plays by the first-string offensive line. So I don't know how, first of all, it's possible to say that they were terrible when they only had 25 snaps. Secondly, I don't think the offense was getting dominated at all. I think there was some scoring. But again, there weren't many plays in the scrimmage. First-string offensive line, you had Horst at left tackle, Jarvis at right tackle. Matt Allen was playing center. At guard, you had Ohanba, who's basically never played before, and Matt Carrick. Ohanba was solid. Carrick struggled a little bit. Horst was good. Jarvis didn't get tested a whole lot from what I saw. Second-string offensive line, Van Opstal was at left tackle, walk-on. Damon Kaler at left guard, he struggled, left the program. Samac was at center. Isaiah was at right guard, he struggled. Spencer Brown was at right tackle. Spencer Brown was pretty good. I went back and I did my unofficial grade sheets of the offensive linemen. If they have a positive impact on a play, they get a plus. If they have a negative impact on a play, they get a negative. If it's neutral, whereas like they're involved in the play but they were neither good nor bad, they get an equal sign neutral. And then there's other plays where they simply didn't have much of an impact on the play. I had Matt Carrick at a -4. He graded out kind of the worst. Now, he started a lot last year. I think he's solid at guard, but was not great on this particular day. But overall, I disagree with what you're saying about, as you said, I went back and watched some of the highlights, and to my untrained eye, it looked similar to last year. Guys getting beat, looking off balance, getting pushed back in the pocket by backup defensive tackles, or ending up on the ground after a whiff. I didn't see much of that. Going back over it, Carrick a little bit here and there. All right, I'll talk about some grades, and then we'll get into specifics. This is SpartanMag.com, where we get serious about football. If you don't like it, there's the door. We're going to talk some serious football for serious people that want to talk serious football. That was me being the bartender from It's a Wonderful Life when George Bailey comes back in and the world has changed. And he says, "Look, mister, we serve hard liquor for guys that want to get drunk fast. And we don't need pixies like you giving the place atmosphere," I think is the line in the movie. And I don't mean pixies. I don't even know what that means. I don't mean to offend anyone with that. That movie was made in the 50s. Anyway, door, serious football. You might get bored. If you get bored, go watch the Olympics or something. All right, so anyway, I have Matt Carrick. Unofficially, he's a -4. Jarvis didn't get tested a whole lot. Didn't figure into a lot of things. I had him like even. Horst, I had Jared Horst, and that was the guy I wanted to see. There were 12 plays that he was in where he figured prominently in the success or failure of a play, or he took on a good player who presented him with a good move or a good strong bull rush or something. I had him at 12 plays, Horst. And he had 9 pluses. That's a lot of pluses. I had Horst with 0 minuses, which is excellent with 12 pivotal plays. I had him with 3 neutrals. Ohanba. I had Ohanba 3 plays graded, 3 pluses. Matt Allen, 4 plays graded, 2 pluses, 2 minuses. Jarvis, I had like 1 plus and 1 minus. And one of the minuses was on a combo block when he was with Carrick, so it was both of them. Damon Kaler, 2 plays graded, 2 minuses. Isaiah, 4 plays graded, 3 minuses, 1 plus. All right. Breakdown. Horst was the interesting one. Now, in terms of the guys you were talking about that made some mistakes, all right, Matt Carrick, he might have been the guy that you saw that was on the ground and so forth. First play of the scrimmage when it was 11 on 11. Offense goes deep, touchdown to Jaden Reed. Called back, holding on Matt Carrick. Go back and look at it, and it was Simeon Barrow, freshman defensive tackle who opted out in the fall. Simeon Barrow had a great day. Simeon Barrow, a defensive tackle, kid from Georgia, excellent in the spring scrimmage. I had no idea he was going to look like that. So he's taking on Carrick, a guy that started a number of games last year. First play of the game, Simeon Barrow two-gaps him, pushes him back, controls him, and then did that deal where he pushes forward to go by him, and Carrick grabs him and holds him. Simeon Barrow, first play in a green and white uniform in Spartan Stadium in his life, and he drew a holding to negate a touchdown against a starter from last year. So when you saw guys unbalanced on the ground, that might have been one of the plays you're talking about. Although on TV they did not pick up that play live. They only showed it as a replay. Later on, Carrick allowed the pocket to get pressed by Kyle King, 3rd and 9. Kyle King, third string defensive end, or he's a defensive tackle now. Kyle King, good strike, and just kind of pressed the pocket a little bit. That might have been one of the plays you saw. Kyle King, by the way, this week was honored by the program Student of the Week or something, Academic Student of the Week. Kyle King, I can't remember who the other one was. The other minus for Matt Carrick, Jalen Hunt, who's a rising defensive tackle in this program. Spin move, beat Carrick, and then could have had a sack, but eased up because you're not allowed to hit the quarterback. And I think he got a touch sack on that one. So Carrick, I would categorize Carrick as a guy that's proven to be a functional offensive lineman. Did not look good in the spring scrimmage. He can do better than that, but I'm not sure he's starting this year. I think at guard, I think it's Duplain and Jarvis right now, and maybe Carrick could get on the field. Anyway, Jarvis, pretty good in pass pro on one occasion against Piotrowski on an outside move. Also, Jarvis and Carrick, double team. It was a stunt. It was Beasley and Camper. And Jack Camper was defensive tackle on that play. They run a stunt. Beasley's on the inside. Jarvis and Carrick are trying to pass it off. And the combination of Jarvis and Carrick got beat on the stunt. And it ends up being a loss of 4 for a touch sack by Beasley. So it was Jarvis and Carrick. I don't know whose fault it was. Maybe they've not repped that enough. I don't know. But Carrick was involved, and that was one of Jarvis's minuses. Horst, 9 pluses, 0 minuses. You want to talk about Horst? Horst is a key player for this year, right? I thought he moved pretty well as a puller on a counter sweep once. There was one that was a neutral, and he showed decent lateral movement, latched onto the defensive tackle, walk on Jacob Lefebvre, stalemate, Kenneth Walker the third, mind you, gain of 7 on an outside zone. But Horst, pretty good job lateral movement, got into defensive tackle, made it work. Horst, decent on an inside move by Brandon Wright. You were asking about Brandon Wright earlier. As a defensive end, Brandon Wright with a pretty good inside move. Horst mirrored it. And Wright tried to set it up with an outside move, counter inside. That counter move was not all that crisp of an inside move. My notes say right here. And Horst did a good job keeping his way to the inside on that counter move. Blocked it. Touchdown pass, Russo to Reed, 42 yards. Horst also looked pretty decent on a run block against Brandon Wright again. Eli Collins gains 4, outside zone. They had a pretty good exchange, and Wright ended up getting a personal foul, hand to the face on that penalty. Horst again, pass protection. Good enough against Michael Fletcher. Incompletion by Peyton Thorne for Ian Stewart, but good enough against Fletcher on that one. Now, on a neutral grade, Horst against Beasley. Now it's first string versus first string. Not going against Lefebvre anymore. Not going against Brandon Wright anymore. I think I talked about this on Spartan Live a month or so ago, specifically about Horst. But let's get into it again because it's an important player. Beasley got a half step on him with a good head and shoulder fake inside and then an arm over to the outside. Horst stabbed him and was behind initially, ran his feet, kind of caught up and was pushing him behind as the ball came out. Comeback, incomplete. But that was pretty good football. Beasley against Horst. Horst caught up. Good, so that's a neutral. Was kind of beaten earlier, but made up for it against a good pass rusher, Beasley. All right, Horst against Beasley again. Good stab by Beasley, and Horst was maybe a quarter step behind. But again, Horst with a lateral movement, slide his feet, was above average at that. Caught up. I gave him a plus on that one. On this other one, I gave him a plus. Now, who is this one? Yeah, this is Horst. I gave him a plus / neutral. It's a 3-yard pass to Cameron Allen. All right, so he's good initially against Beasley, and Beasley was stunting inside and was kind of sliding off of him as Thornton got rid of the ball. If that had been a live game action, Beasley might have slid off of him and given the quarterback a bump. So it was good initially, didn't sustain. Maybe an offensive line coach would grade that as a negative because it didn't sustain. I'm not sure. I gave it a plus and a neutral. All right, here's a plus. He's going against Fletcher. Fletcher with kind of a slow inside move, and Horst easily swallowed him up. Pass protection. All right, another time against Fletcher. Bull rush by Fletcher, and Horst solid, withstood the bull rush against Fletcher. 2-minute drill late in the game. Horst against Fletcher. Out route to Tyler Hunt, tight end, gain of 4 yards. Fletcher didn't really offer all that much, and Horst didn't really have to work that hard to give good pass protection. And then I've got a neutral, 2-minute drill. Fletcher shows a little bit more motor on this one. Horst had to work a little bit more, and I have that one as a neutral, not a positive or a negative. Horst showed a lot, gave us a lot to look at, and I came out of that after watching it again, thinking Horst, yeah, no question. He can play at this level. He can play Big Ten football. He'll keep working. He'll get better at it. And I think Horst could be the left tackle. I think Arcuri could play right tackle. Spencer Brown gave us a lot to look at. Now, Spencer Brown was a 4-star recruit, and I said, whoa, I don't know, he's a 4-star recruit. He had a lot. He looks good in the airport, has a frame, has some straight line speed. But in high school, I didn't like his lateral movement that much. I thought he was a 3-star guy. Good kid, nothing against him at all. But I was like, hey, pump the brakes. Don't put him in the Hall of Fame. I know he's a 4-star guy, but don't put him in the Hall of Fame just yet. I thought maybe he could be a defensive end, maybe even beef up defensive tackle. He's been an offensive tackle. They're talking about him as a guy that they think can be an important part in the future. So they said last fall. I was like, okay, I don't know. He got on the field, mop-up duty, whatever. Then in the spring game, I saw progress. I graded him 7 plays of his, made the grade sheet. I gave him 4 pluses, 2 neutrals, and 1 minus. Only 1 minus out of 7. He got a lot of snaps, a lot of action, and was solid. I thought it was a nice step for Spencer Brown. Do you want the specifics? So it looks like we've only lost about 5 viewers since I started doing this stuff. So I'll go to the specifics. Spencer Brown. Now, I guess I could show you the video here, but if I do that, it's kind of a copyright infringement. I don't get in trouble, but I don't know. But I didn't go through it. I'd have to chop up the film and have cut-ups, and that would seriously take about, I don't know how long that would take. Anyway, Spencer Brown, I'll just tell you verbally what he was doing. I don't know if you guys care about this or not. You give me a thumbs up or not. I don't know. It's July. We're talking football. Spencer Brown, former 4-star out of Walled Lake, 2nd-string right tackle. All right, against Piotrowski, did a good job tracking him on an inside stunt. Spencer Brown changed directions pretty good to track Piotrowski when Piotrowski did a spin move to try to chase a scrambling Thorn. So Brown, good, pretty good change of direction there. I gave him a neutral. Pass pro against Jacob Panashuk. Noah Kim, completion midway through the scrimmage. And it was just pretty good give and take with Panashuk. Nobody won. Pass came out. I gave him a neutral also. Kick set to the outside. And then counter back to the inside against Panashuk again on an inside rush. Panashuk with a hard shoulder club. Brown withstood it pretty well and rallied back to block him and pin him to the inside as Kim sidestepped him to the outside. Not bad by Brown. Looked capable, but young and a little awkward on that, but made it work. I gave him a neutral on that one. But he's going against Panashuk, a proven guy, and it was a good test for Spencer Brown. Got 4 more from Spencer Brown. Now against Michael Fletcher. Again, not much of a pass rush from Fletcher. Brown got his hands on him, and Fletcher just kind of stopped. Fletcher can't really turn the corner all that great. He's good straight line speed. He's productive. Had 3.5 sacks last year in limited time. Straight line speed. He's strong. Good kid. I've always said since he's a recruit, he's not like a natural edge rush. Fletcher is not like an edge rush, turn the corner, hip flex, ankle flex, burst to the quarterback type of guy. But neither was Will Golston. You could be a good football player and be that. But with Fletcher also, with his pass rush, not only does he not much of a turn the corner guy, what I'm noticing is sometimes when you get your hands on him, he just kind of stops. And that's not good. I'm sure they'll keep working on that. But this one, Spencer Brown, not much of a pass rush from Fletcher. Brown gets his hands on him and Fletcher just stops. All right, another one plus for Spencer Brown against Noah Harvey. This time Noah Harvey blitzing, inside pass rush move. Spencer Brown pretty good against it. Did a good enough job. Got a negative against Panashuk. Panashuk got a half step on Spencer Brown and got in on a pressure. Panashuk with a duck under rip. So Spencer Brown got beat on that one by a pretty good player. Then I give him a plus. Solid enough against Josiah Robinson. That was the one time Theo Day dropped back and just kept it. And Theo Day only had like 2 snaps in that game. Ball didn't come out. I don't know what Theo Day was doing. Good kid. I wish him the best. And Brown was solid enough against Josiah Robinson. Robinson no longer in the program either. So that's my Spencer Brown notes. I thought Spencer Brown was solid. Samac only graded him for 1 play. He was a good block against safety Kendall Brooks on a running back screen. Van Opstal, the walk-on, 3 pluses. Once was good enough against a Beasley inside move. Another time decent against Beasley. Another time decent stalemate against Jack Camper. After Jack Camper had a really good takeoff, and Van Opstal was pretty solid against him. Pass play, Noah Kim. Completion to walk-on Nick Hunter. The negative for Van Opstal early was beaten for a touch sack by Beasley. So getting back to your earlier question, you may have seen Van Opstal get beat, and don't grade the entire offensive line on a walk-on second-string offensive tackle. Isaiah struggled a little bit. I had 3 minuses. He had a false start. He gave up a bull rush to Simeon Barrow, disengaged, flushed the quarterback. So if that's what you saw, Isaiah, if you're seeing offensive linemen fail, that might have been one. Also, Jalen Hunt, 2-gapped Isaiah, moved laterally, pressed him, disengaged, made the tackle, gain of 2. Isaiah got a plus. Decent pass pro stalemate against Jalen Hunt. Hunt tried to cross his face in 1 gap, and Isaiah was equal to the task on that one. So if you're picking and choosing, you might see Barrow get beat. Kaler get beat. Barrow beat him for a pressure, quick shoulder club, ran his feet, beat Kaler. Kaler also beaten by Deshaun Mallory. Mallory 2-gapped and controlled him, disengaged, tackled Donovan England for a gain of 1 on a split zone. So if you're watching Kaler get beat a couple times, Isaiah get beat a couple of times, Van Opstal once, over the course of the scrimmage, you can find offensive linemen getting beat and do the things that you talked about, the negatives that you saw. But in my experience watching that scrimmage, it was not a laundry list of negatives. Now, I took a lot of time just before we went on. I was looking through the questions, and I saw this question. I'm like, okay, I'll go back and look at my notes, categorize them, and see what it looks like compared to what you're saying. So that took me 30 or 40 minutes to do that, and that's one of the reasons that this show starts 5 minutes late, because I get caught up on some of those things. What I didn't have time to do is go back over it and go over the whole scrimmage and do stats in terms of, okay, the offense, first-string offense against second-string defense, second-string offense against first-string defense, and then ones versus ones. What were the yards per play? Was the offense averaging 5 yards per play, 2 yards per run, 1 yard per run, or 5 yards per run? I'm not sure what those averages are. I think it would end up being like the first-string offense probably averaged 4 yards per carry and a decent number of yards per play. Not bad. Not bad at all. Not bad to the point where you would say the offensive line was just Swiss cheese, like you suggested. So I looked into the micro there with some specifics, and the pluses and minuses, most of those offensive linemen were heavy on the pluses. So you may have seen it that way, but I did not see that with Horst, did not see it with Matt Allen, did not see it with Ohanba, did not see it with Jarvis. Maybe with Carrick, maybe with Isaiah. Now, as far as Ohanba goes, which is interesting, starting at left tackle or left guard in place of Duplain. Let me find my Ohanba notes. All right. Well, I had 3. Actually, I think 4 plays by Ohanba that I graded as having an impact on a play. And all 4 were positives. All 4 were pluses. This is a kid from Georgia that was a 4-star, didn't do anything for a couple of years. Last year shows up on field goal protection. And then got on the field a little bit, mop-up duty, looked okay. So a lot of times when there's a new coach, just because it's a change of scenery, change of voice, change of coaches, whatever it is, players get rescued. They might be wavering toward not ever becoming anything. Then there's a new coach, and boom, they become Devin Thomas or Jonell St. Deke, or they become Flozell Adams. Flozell Adams in 1993, 94 was not looking so great. Then Perlis is gone. You bring in a guy named Ken Manny. You bring in a guy named Jim Bowman. And Flozell Adams became Flozell Adams. I'm not sure if Flozell Adams becomes Flozell Adams that we know today were it not for that little change there. Nothing against the previous coaches, although I think the people I just mentioned were better than the people that were with him before that. Ohanba. So is he the guy that's saved by a coaching change? I mean, we didn't see him at all for 2 years. And I was like, man, that guy, he's kind of getting in bust territory. Not anymore, okay? All right, so 4 pluses. One of them, 4-yard gain by Eli Collins outside zone. Ohanba, good job. I didn't mention who he blocked, but I gave him a plus on that one. Now, I'm giving you the details because I don't want you to just come out. Any bozo could come out here and say, hey, Spencer Brown played good. What the hell does that mean? I want some details. The micro. Now, I'm not a professional when it comes to breaking these things down. I'm just a sports writer. But, I don't know. I mean, coaches obviously know more about this than I do, but any of you guys could do it. Is spend the time, look at it, and break it down, and just come up with those specifics. All I did was save you the time of looking at it. That's what I'm doing here. Ohanba. All right, I got a plus on this one. He was going against Evan Brunning, walk-on defensive tackle. Got a lot of them. Zone block. Got a lot of them initially, but didn't quite sustain. And Brunning ended up getting off for the tackle. But it was weird because he moved Brunning off the line 2 yards, but then Brunning kind of got off and made the tackle. So is that a plus or a minus? I'm not even sure. But the initial was good, and the way he controlled him was good, albeit against a second stringer. Now in this case, Ohamba's with the ones, and at the beginning of the scrimmage, first string was going against second string defense. So he's first string going against a second string defensive tackle. Would have liked to have seen him. All right, so got a plus here again against Brunning. Pass protection, incompletion by Thorne. Brunning is a walk-on. Good pass protection. And then he also had good pass protection against an unidentified defensive tackle. I couldn't pick out who it was. Might have been Jalen Hunt. So Ohanba was good. It's not as if he was doing this against Barrow or Hunt or Mallory. But Ohanba, pretty good day in that regard. That's it. That's the offensive line stuff. So you asked a very detailed question, and I could have just said, no, I thought the offensive line was okay. And that wouldn't be worth crap, right? And I'll go all the way back to 1998, and the reason I became semi-obsessed with watching film in order to answer questions like these. You go back to 1998, and the reason I did it is because of a guy named Robert Smith. Because Robert Smith was a good player, NFL player, but he wasn't really productive in terms of tackles and sacks. And people were saying, well, he's getting double-teamed. And I'd hear that, and I didn't know for sure. I'm not watching the game, and you're taking notes, and you're watching the ball. Guy scores a touchdown. But in the trenches, are you really watching what's going on? And the answer was no, I wasn't. So I had to go back and watch the game again. I watched Robert Smith every single play to see what was going on. So that when I did talk shows and people asked about Robert Smith, I might have a chance to at least have the backing to know at least a little bit of what I was talking about. That's what this all comes down to, is trying to get to the point where I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. Not everything, just a little bit. So that went back to 1998. That's when I started to really watch a lot of this crap. And the more I watched, the more I learned and saw. And I'm like, well, I didn't notice that the first time. Then I go to practice and I'd ask Bowman or some of the other guys about this or that, or even go back to Pat Rule or who's the guy that's the coordinator in the SEC now that almost got that coaching job here when Dantonio got it? He was the coordinator at Georgia. Can't think of his name. I talked to him here and there. Talked to Stowlin a lot about things. Even Dantonio when he was an assistant, Harlan Barnett still. And and then a lot of that stuff would end up in Spartan Magazine, and we got good feedback on that. People liked it. So it's not for everybody. So those of you that got bored with it, Go watch synchronized skateboarding or some crap like that. Nothing against those people either. A lot of those people are fine athletes. All right. What we got here? Let's go over here to the comments and reactions and other questions. There are other questions that popped up. Maybe we'll get those tomorrow if we have one. If we have Spartan Mag Live tomorrow. We are already past 2 hours, so let's get rolling here. We're going long. It's preseason. I'm a little ramped up, a little bit hopped up, a little bit hyped up. Apologize about that. George Page says, hey, Jim, seems like things are ramping up for football season. What was the vibe like at Big Ten Media Day? Enthusiasm seems to be up. I'd agree with that. I mean, every coach is going to be enthusiastic, right? Every head coach is going to be enthusiastic. You're the type of guy that was probably would like to go to the kickoff luncheon that they have, usually in the Hilton, I think, in Chicago. That's always a lot of fun, a lot of optimism, and everybody's optimistic. It's the way football is in the preseason, right? But this year, you're going to have a lot of Big Ten first game of the year conference games. I'm not sure that's a good thing. It's a good thing for the preseason hype and the interest heading into that first game. And when it's kicked off, it'll be exciting. But Friday night, Labor Day, there's just a lot on the line. Michigan State loses to Northwestern. That's going to be a severe kick to the gut of one of the 14 teams in the Big Ten for the fans for the year. And sometimes it's hard to come back from that. And you are what your record says you are and all that stuff. But those losses sometimes are a little easier to stomach when they happen in October, after you've had some games and then kind of ease into it. Or Northwestern loses and their fan base takes one to the gut right off the bat. I know the Big Ten Network wants the inventory being a college football game on the air live that night. They want good games. SEC plays a lot of big games early, so the Big Ten is reacting, and they want some big games early. They want the Big Ten Network. They don't want Minnesota Gophers against the University of Buffalo, like it was a few years ago. They don't want Michigan State against Akron on a Friday night, or Michigan State against Youngstown State Labor Day weekend, Friday night for the Big Ten Network. Because the SEC has big games right off the bat. Texas A&M gets South Carolina, that type of thing. I don't know what the games are this year. I know Alabama plays Miami, and there's some other ones. But the SEC is really, they really kick things off with a bang. Daytona 500 style. Now, they do things with a bang, and then they've got that crappy week in November, the week before all the rivalry games, like week 11 out of 12. That's when you have, Alabama against the Citadel or some crap like that. And that's later in the year. And they take some abuse for that, but they don't mind because that gives everybody a little bit of rest before Auburn, Alabama, and before whatever the other games are at the end of the year. For the Big Ten, for Michigan State fans, I think it'd be better served. Everybody's excited for the opener no matter who it's against, right? We haven't had fans at Spartan Stadium in 2 years. Season opener, everybody's excited. Night game, Labor Day weekend, do it on a Friday like Mark Hollis planned it so that you can have the game and still get up for one more weekend if you going up north or whatever you do Labor Day weekend. So I like it on Friday rather than Saturday. Friday night's good. Season opener, Spartan Stadium, good. Play Youngstown State. Play Akron. Play Western Michigan. Play a mid-major. What I think you want to do is if you're going to play a mid-major, and of course you've got 3 non-conference games. You got one against a credible opponent. This year it's Miami of Ohio, Miami of Florida. The other 2 are mid-majors. So you have to play 2 mid-majors. My friend Tim Stout doesn't understand this. He says, why are we playing games that are not competitive? Well, I'll tell you what, you play those games, you're going to lose some of those games. We've seen that over the years. But you play those because you need the home game for the money. You need it for the budget. You need 2 of your 3 over a 2-year period. You need 5 of your 6 non-conference games to be home games to meet budget. That's the way it is. That's the way budgets are built. And you can say, well, why do 5 of 6? Why not just play 3 good ones and have home and homes with everybody? Okay, you can do that. First of all, you're going to lose some of those games. Secondly, you're going to have 2 fewer home games or 3 fewer home games over a 2-year cycle. So you're losing that money. So all of a sudden that money can't go into the tennis program that you're complaining about that always loses. because my friend Tim Stout complains about Michigan State's Olympic sports teams that don't win. So he wants the Olympic sports teams to win, and then he wants a bunch of road games. And so he wants like no money. He wants to take a money loss there and still find a way to do all. Doesn't work that way. So I know Michigan State would rather play Youngstown State first game of the year because you're going to sell a lot of tickets anyway because it's the first game. Night game, Labor Day, Friday night, great. First game, what's the team look like? Have fun, have some drinks, tailgate, go up to Torch Lake, call it a day. Come back next week, play Central Michigan, beat them, you're 2-0. Come back the next week, play Miami, Florida, lose, or you play Washington, or you play Notre Dame or whatever, you're 2-1, maybe you're 3-0. Then you get into the Big Ten. Then you go. That's the way Dantonio had it. And that served some of his seasons well. It's not Michigan State's call. The Big Ten said, this is who you're playing. This is when you're playing. Now, they're never going to ask the Wolverines to play on a Friday night, Labor Day weekend, I don't think. But, so anyway, Tucker doesn't care. Tucker's like the schedule's the schedule. He doesn't care. He'll play. He doesn't care. But Michigan State's a program that kind of needs, I'm not going to say needs help, but you do things out of a preferred order and things can get tough. Ask Tennessee. That's not the way Bill Snyder built it at Kansas State. There were some years when Minnesota built it that way for them. Fleck did it that way. Anyway, Peyton Fleetmeyer says, August 4th, my birthday, yes sir. That's when camp starts for Michigan State. Gordon Tonona says, 15 commitments from 9 states. Impressive for Michigan State. Jacob Terry says, anyone else's power out? Storm yesterday caused quite some damage in Oakland County. I was driving back from Indianapolis, got caught in a lot of rain just outside of Lansing. A lot of rain. There's a tree down over there in the bike path. Saw that last night. Didn't lose power here, though. Kevin Thomas, do you think we get at least 6 wins this season? Yes. Yeah, I think the quarterback's going to be a good situation no matter who wins that. I think the running back situation is better than last year. I think Walker's good. I think the competition back there is good. Eli Collins will be better. I think the wide receivers are good. Ricky White, Jaden Reed is good. Trey Mosley's going to be a little better. Naylor's good if he stays healthy. Tight end is weak. Offensive line's going to be better. Offense should be all right. Defensive line's good. Defensive tackles are good. DN's good against the run. Pass rush, so-so. Linebackers in the middle. I think Crouch is in there. Could be Harvey. Crouch and Harvey, I think, could be solid. Safeties, Henderson and Gross. I think that's going to be okay. Henderson really likes playing with Gross. Heard some more good things about Gross this week. I think that's okay. Corners, no idea. No idea. Kalen Gervin's got to be better than he's been. And if he's not better than he's been, you got to hope that some of the 4 free agents are good. Kimbrough, the kid from Florida. Williams, the kid from Alabama. I'm guessing might be the 2 leaders there. With the best chance to do it. Crump and Lowry, I don't know. Gervin, I don't know. I talked to Harlan Barnett a little bit today over at camp. And he says he's eager to start working with them. He thinks they got some ability. That's why they went after those guys, the frames and the ability. Harlan Barnett, over the course of time, will get good football out of a couple of corners. I don't know who they're going to be, but I think that'll happen. Will it be ready to fly against Northwestern week number 1? I don't know. Can they win 6 games? Yeah. You know, I don't know what the 6 are, but we went over this last week. I look at it like, who are the guaranteed losses? Ohio State. I think at Miami is going to be really difficult. I think Miami's pretty good. De'Aaron King is back. His knee's good. They're all saying it's 100%. ACC Media Days, he said it's 100%. His teammates said it's 100%. King's going to be good. They did a good job in the portal, getting some good players. Miami's cycling up. It's a tough year to go down there and play them. I think that's a loss. Penn State coming here. I mean, Michigan State was out playing them for a half last year. That was a shoe game anyway. The shoes failed in that game. I'd like to ask Tucker a little bit more about that. Penn State, what are they going to be? I don't know. But, maybe they lose that game. Michigan, I think, Michigan's going to have problems. Indiana's going to be tough. And the rest of them, I'm not saying Michigan State's going to win those, but I'm saying, like, okay, who are the losses? Ohio State, Miami, maybe Penn State, maybe Indiana? 4? I mean, you got to be really good to be consistent enough to go ahead and win your 8 winnable games. Am I giving Indiana too much credit? Maybe, but I think Penix is good. And they're returning a lot of guys on defense, too, aren't they? They're losing their coordinator, though. But can they win 6? Yeah. I think that would be a good, a decent step toward returning to form. Don Straight, thank you for that super chat. Appreciate that. Wizzy Spartan says, it's not like the chemistry has been great the last few years. Correct. Ronnie says, Shoot timeline. Talking about Jaden Shoot, the basketball player from Yorkville, Illinois. He said, we'd love to get a bird in the hand. Thanks, Jim. What did Shoot say? I talked to him yesterday about it, and he was very quiet about it. What other schools are you thinking about visiting? He visited Michigan State. Who else did he visit? Illinois, I think. Who else are you going to visit? We'll think about that when the season's over. Are you going to take any more visits? I'll talk about that when the season's over. Do you have a timeline? We'll talk about that when the season. So, there were 3 answers that he said we'll talk about that when the season's over. He didn't want to talk about it. He was a little bit more open with answering questions when I saw him at the Run and Slam at Fort Wayne in May. Good kid. I asked him if he thinks it's going to be a tough decision eventually, and I can't remember what he said. I'm going to type in those quotes later tonight, maybe do a story. Hopefully by tonight. I gave up caffeine, but sometimes it's a tough day to give up caffeine sometimes. Timeline, he didn't really indicate timeline. Good player. I thought he's been pretty good when I've seen him in the past. Today I really saw it. In the early stage of that game, championship game, Izzo was there. Underwood was there for Illinois. By the way, Brad Underwood was the only coach that had a mask on. I guess that's good. I don't know. It's just a lot of times these coaches want to be seen. Whatever. Greg Gard was there from Wisconsin. But Shoot with the quick release. He's a good shooter, and the defense got out on him. They were aggressive on him. They identified him. We got to stop this guy. Everywhere he went, he was shadowed by good athletes, by another championship level team. So, excuse me, that's rude. So when he shot, it was quick, but it wasn't like rushed off balance, sloppy. It was correct, and the lift. One time bringing it up, transition, pulled, hit a 3. One time transition, bam. One time jab step, bam. So I saw it today, and he's not just like a Rick Mount non-athlete shooter. Like I said, he went up for that. He moved well on defense, communicates on defense, bumping cutters. He doesn't shy away from contact, away from the ball. He's got a couple rebounds. He's good. He's pretty good. Duke just offered. We will see. Spartan MD says, apologies. I don't feel tardy. Give me something to write on, man. Spartan MD says, update on WB's West Bloomfield's Dylan Tatum. I hear he likes Michigan State still. He loves Michigan State. He loves Mel Tucker. But can he pull the trigger and actually turn down Michigan State and turn down Michigan and his high school coach to sign with Michigan State? I'll believe it when I see it. I haven't heard anything, any updates. But I hear it's kind of close to the vest. I hear that the Tatum camp is keeping things close and tight. Michigan State's made it pretty clear. You want, it's your high school coach, whatever, but if you want to go play defensive back for a wide receiver, you can, or you can come here and play defensive back for the best set of defensive backs coaches in the country. We'll be okay either way. You can make a big mistake if you want to. We're going to be here getting it done with or without you. Old Tuck says, Mel talked about box safety versus no safety. What had to happen this year for MSU to not require box safety to stop the run? Box safety is that's just a safety coming down to the box area to play at the linebacker level in the box. That's, instead of having a 4-3 where you have 3 linebackers in there, it's a 4-2-5. So up front, it's 4-2. So sometimes you need a linebacker to come in there to create a 4-3 as a box safety. So you're asking what had to happen this year for MSU to not require box safety to stop the run. If you could stop the run with 6, so if it's a 3 receiver formation and you've got 6 in the box, and you've got 5 defensive backs, so 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers. You got 6 in the box, 3 receivers. And if they run the ball with 3 receivers, 6 is the standard number. And if you can stop the run with 6, then you've got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You're playing with 2 deep safeties, and you're not having to put an extra guy in the box. So you're stopping the run with the standard number in the box, which is what Alabama does. They don't have to bring a guy up. Sometimes they do it. Sometimes they'll match him up anyway and play press with 1 safety deep, stop the run and lock you up here, and you're in handcuffs, and you're like, concede. So he said, what had to happen this year for MSU to not require box safety to stop the run? The safety's going to come down. If you stop the run with 6, you can do it. So what has to happen? You need Allen, is that his name? The defensive tackle from Belleville? I always forget his name. You need your defensive tackles, Mallory and Allen, to be great. And they could be very good. Defensive ends to stop the run. Crouch, I think, is going to be good against the run. I think Harvey can do it. Harvey's got to get comfortable with the 2-gapping scheme. He was good last year when they 1-gapped. He's got to become good when they 2-gap as well. I think those 6 can be pretty good against the run. And if you have that, and you have your 2 safety, you might be able to keep your 2 safeties deep more often. And then the 3 corners, whether they're pressing or some sort of 2-deep zone, you can do more when you're stopping the run with the standard number. I think they're more capable of doing it this year. Antoine Simmons, you lose him. He was good. Your Nicholas Dowell, we'll see what he looks like. All right. Detroit Spartan said he lost Max Christie to MSU. Okay, you're talking about Krzyzewski? Okay. That's right. Duke did like Max Christie, right? Good point. Gordon Janona says, and Miles Bridges. That's another good point. Comp said Chicago area. Yeah, so that's not Bridges. All right. Yeah, and I forgot that about Christie. I remember saying that about Christie, that Michigan State had never beaten Krzyzewski for a Chicago area guy. And I was saying that throughout the Max Christie recruitment. Then they went out and did it. And here, a year later, I forgot already. But ladies and gentlemen, that's my brain. Got a lot of miles on my brain. I'm an old man. So I've been making more mistakes like that than I used to when I was 30, sadly. So that's why I take more notes. That won't be the last time I forget something that happened 9 months ago, 10 months ago. All right. Peyton Fleetmeyer says, didn't a bunch of Germans go to that camp today? Was it over when the Germans bombed the camp? They didn't bomb the camp. That was from Animal House. You guys know that. Don't mean to offend any Germans. There were some Germans. There was a defensive end from Norway that was quick. I noticed him right away. I'm like, that guy's got a quick takeoff. And talked a little bit to some people about him. And saw on Twitter that one of the guys that was bringing those recruits here said that guy, defensive end, ran a 4.640 today. And looking at his legs and stuff, I think he's about 6'4", 230, 240. Nice-sized guy. And I think they're going to other camps also. But there's a couple of those guys Michigan State's going to keep an eye on, back burner type guys. But I'm not sure any of those guys become primary recruits. Those guys were 2022s. Those guys would have been better off going to camps earlier in the summer when there weren't as many players committed and maybe sprinkling in some more mid-major camps. But some of those guys look like grown men. And Michigan State was looking at some offensive linemen too, so it was good for those offensive linemen to go get some of those international players. Yeah, there were some Germans. There's a Norwegian or two. I've got a list of the people. Not all of them have big bios or anything, but I would imagine some of those guys will hook up somewhere. It made for a lot of people at camp, and it raised the overall talent level of the camp. It was good. Flow Magic 20 says, Spartan MD is my idol. Don Strait says, down in the house, sipping Evan Williams. Jim, with more exposure now, break down what you see as Tucker's strengths and what excites you as far as what he brings to Spartan football. Dude, that's another 2-hour show. And I saw you over in DeWitt, and you know it. And I was busy with some coaching stuff that day. And I just noticed some stuff over at Big Rapids a couple weeks earlier, and that's when I wrote that thing a few weeks ago about saying that Michigan State football was a stock buy based on things that I saw. Just the way recruits respond to him, the way other coaches for other teams respond to him. That's just part of it. Saw some other things there that I'll keep under my hat for another few years, depending on what's going on. Interesting stuff. Comp, I thought sponsors got priority. My bad. I see what you're saying now. You had the super chat, and then your question was supposed to go to the front, not 2.5 hours into the thing. They do have priority. I just didn't execute properly. My bad on that. Alan J says, let me check the numbers here. Alan J says, with the new name, image, and likeness, Michigan State will be an average team at best. From here on out, they won't get the big recruits, Alan J says. I wasn't aware Michigan State ever got big recruits. I think that with name, image, and likeness, for the most part, most programs will still get the same players they've always gotten. I assume Alan J is a Michigan fan. Michigan could be helped by the name, image, and likeness thing because they've got a lot of people. Michigan State's got a lot of people, big, deep pocket donors. Michigan has a lot of them also, and football's very important to them. I mean, they went out and passed the hat and got Harbaugh, and they're all panicking about a lot of things. There will be some donors with businesses that will have sponsorships. I think Michigan will benefit from that. Michigan, to their credit, has been reluctant to cheat over the years. I give them credit for that for the most part. Now they don't have to cheat, and maybe they'll have a chance to compete for some more players in the Southeast than maybe they have in the past. So, but you're saying, so people are talking like the MAC schools, that there's going to be a bigger gap than ever between the haves and the have-nots. Well, 20 years ago, Central Michigan and Western Michigan were getting the guys that Michigan State didn't get, and guys in the Midwest and maybe some guys in Florida like Antonio, that beat Michigan State down here in 2007, Antonio Brown. Central had those players then. It was that way 20 years ago, and it was that way 5 years ago, and it's that way right now. Central Michigan, regardless of what Michigan State's locker room looks like, and what Michigan's locker room looks like, and what Purdue's locker room looks like, they can still only sign 22, 22, and 22 roughly per year. So the same players from Muskegon and Kalamazoo and Traverse City and Cleveland that have always gone to Central Michigan and Western are still going to go to those schools. No matter how much the financial gap gets bigger, they still get the same players. And those players are still going to have as much of a chip on the shoulder. And when they go to the bench press, 250 is still 250, just like it was in 1971 and 81 and 91 and 2001 and 2011. It's still the same weight in the weight room. It's still the same chip on the shoulder, and it's still the same players. And those players are still going to jump up and still beat Big Ten teams once in a while. And Alan J., if you're a Michigan fan, Michigan State is still going to jump up and beat Michigan quite often. Noah Sprunger saying, evening, folks. Ronnie says, Noah, lots of Gates predictions. What changed? I thought the staff was not in love with him. I can answer that a little bit. The staff wasn't sure, like I said a couple of weeks ago, he's not a can't miss. He's got some talent. There's a diamond in there somewhere. Do we take him and decide to really refine that diamond? Things like that. Then you find out, okay, maybe he wants to come to your place. Then you take him. Then maybe you do. All right, we'll take him. Draymond Green was in that category once upon a time. Morris Peterson was in that category once upon a time. I'm going to think of some football examples. Can't think of one right now, but I'm sure there's some. Gordon Tonona says, I think State will be the surprise team in football in the FBS. We play Nebraska, Michigan, and PSU, Penn State at home. Gordon Tonona on the record with a big prediction. MSU Hunter Spartan. By the way, people have been doing this for 2.5 hours. It's 11:30 at night Eastern Time. I apologize for keeping you up this late. MSU Hunter Spartan says, Comp, your thoughts on possible Big Ten expansion. I mentioned that earlier. I don't know. People talking Kansas. It doesn't help football, basketball, whatever. you've got 14 teams in the Big Ten. That means you've got 14 mouths to feed. So right now everybody's getting what, like $60 million a year on TV? So whoever you get better give you another $70 million. Otherwise, everybody gets less money. So, I mean, Kansas, Oklahoma State. I think Big Ten might just stand pat because I think they're blindsided by this. I'm not sure they'll have a plan. I don't know whether Warren is going to be as forward-thinking and as aggressive as Delaney is. I suspect Delaney might have done something with the Pac-12. There's rumors that SC and UCLA have expressed some interest. Would not shock me. Pac-12 network's been a disaster. Their finances are down on the West Coast. They need to re-spruce things back up. The world is shrinking. Coast to coast is smaller than it used to be. If you add Colorado, you're almost in the West Coast. Colorado borders Nebraska. Do you go ahead and go super conference and you end up with an AFC and an NFC, and instead of having 14, you have 24? Do you just go ahead and take USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, and then Boston College, and see if Notre Dame wants to get involved? I went over that earlier. Right now, Notre Dame might not ever need a conference. I'm not sure what the finances are. I don't know enough about those stuff. I don't know. If I was talking about Big Ten expansion, I don't have any expertise on that. I'm just a jughead like everybody else. I don't know. Brian Scalacci says, laughing out loud, "Come on, Alan." Nathan Winters says, "Jim, how's it going?" Big Will says, "Did you hear the SEC has contacted Michigan, Ohio State, and Clemson to join the conference?" I did hear that. I don't doubt it, but I don't think they'll get much traction there. Maybe from Clemson. A lot of people have said Clemson's been an SEC school all along. If Clemson left the SEC, ACC, and let's say Florida State did too, what becomes the ACC? Then is the ACC bombed and broken up? Can the ACC continue? And then what is Notre Dame's deal down there with them? Are you going to end up with 3 super conferences, an AFC, an NFC, and a UFC? Dude, I don't know. But these are economic forces, and sometimes you just don't know where the Bulls and the Bears are going to end up with things. Bjorn Charlie says Notre Dame has to join a conference now with a 12-team playoff. I don't doubt that, but I don't really know the calculus on that. Why do they have to join now that it's a 12-team playoff? I was thinking that now that it's a playoff as an independent, there's more avenues for them to get in. But you can correct me on that. I don't really understand all the dynamics there. Big Will says, do you know when Ryan Baer and Alex Van Sumeren plan on making a decision? Van Sumeren could be coming pretty soon. And Ryan Baer is kind of torn. Michigan State, Kentucky. I haven't heard when they'll be deciding. Ryan Baer, offensive lineman from Ohio, Northeast Ohio. 4-star offensive lineman. Van Sumeren is a defensive tackle from Essexville Garber, which is located, you're familiar with the Michigan map. Essexville Garber is in the thumb. So Van Sumeren's a good those couple 4-stars. They get those guys, and Michigan State's recruiting class would blip up into the top 25. You need about 6 or 7 4-stars to have a top 25 class. Not sure Michigan State's going to have that this year. Van Sumeren would help. Baer would help. Kevin Thomas, the wide receiver from Philadelphia, who's about to decide, would help if they get him. He's between Michigan State and West Virginia. Mangum, 4-star safety from Groves, Birmingham Groves. Good player. It's Michigan State, West Virginia. West Virginia's shown him a lot of love and took the lead. Georgia Tech also. Michigan State's behind. Michigan State's rallying right now, trying to catch up. Had a Zoom with him last night. They'll have him on campus, I think, the 31st. He plans to decide the next day. Question is, why would he decide and put August 1st as a decision date and still have a late-breaking visit with Michigan State on the 31st? I've not talked to them in a while, texting here and there, but I think they might just be giving Michigan State another last chance at the end. But if his heart is already in one direction, I don't know. I'm going to try to find out some more about that. Good kid, good family, good player. Of course, his older brother played with Mel Tucker for 1 year at Colorado. Mel Tucker left. That's a sore spot with the matriarchs in the family. So there's some moving pieces there. But you show them a lot of love, you'll get an inside track. And West Virginia's been very good at showing people love. Nico Marchiol, the quarterback that Michigan State recruited, went to West Virginia, said he had the time of his life, committed to West Virginia. Kevin Thomas liked West Virginia. I asked him what was the big deal. He says they just make it feel like home. A little bit of country roads there. They get Mangum. Hey, West Virginia's had some really good teams over the years, flirted with some national championships. Michigan State's recruited against them frequently over the years. They got a new coach there. I can't even remember who it is. But they got something going on there with recruiting this year. I don't know what bells and whistles and kumbaya and what they're serving. I don't know what's going on there, but it's working. I don't remember a time ever when people have visited West Virginia and come out of there singing the praises of that place as much as they are this year, so credit to them. Smokescreen 88 says, assuming Michigan State is able to land Gates Jr., would you expect Michigan State to go after another wide receiver? Are Winfield or Kevin Thomas still a possibility? Well, Kevin Thomas is supposed to decide here in 2 or 3 days. If he goes West Virginia, that answers your question probably on Gates. So that might have something to do with Gates. Winfield is the 4-star wide receiver from Texas committed to the Longhorns. Michigan State surprisingly got a visit out of him, official visit, about a month ago. And everything is real quiet there. Things were quiet before the visit. They've been quiet since then. Michigan State has felt confident about that. They feel like, not confident like we're going to get him, but confident like they feel like they're in a solid place with Winfield, so they're going to keep staying there and keep slugging it out. And so it's a possibility. Yes, it's still a possibility from what I understand. Peyton Fleetmeyer says, did the Germans play good football today? I was watching the linemen, and that 43, Dos Santos, who's from Norway, he could play somewhere, and Michigan State will keep an eye on him. There were a couple other ones. I'll get those names later. But there were some guys. Some of those guys were big. They had some man size on them, and they were good competition against some of the other young campers that they're looking at in younger years. But I'm not sure there was I don't think there's any primary guys that came out of there. In years past, I think like Dantonio or Stoutland might have gotten in on some of those guys. Sometimes they would get behind in recruiting, numbers-wise. There's some guys capable, but I'll have to put my ear to the ground a little bit more on that, but I'm not sure any primary is going to come out of that. But they weren't bad. Spartan MD says, Comp, agree that grabbing Pac-12 schools is the answer. No other schools have the cachet other than Notre Dame. And I'm not big about the Big Ten becoming a coast-to-coast thing, but if it's super conference time and people are picking sides, you don't want to be left in the corner with your thumb in your ear or somewhere else. And the Big Ten and the Pac-12 have been on the same page and seen eye to eye on a number of things over the years, including last fall with COVID, for better, for worse. Big Ten sneezed, they caught a cold, Rose Bowl, they've both tried to be academic first institutions, enterprises. There's a reason that the Rose Bowl at one point said, look, we're just going to have Big Ten and Pac-10, Pac-8 back then. That was like in the 1930s or 40s they came to that determination. Why? Because schools from the South that had played in there, they were bending the rules back then with ringers and whatever, and the Rose Bowl just said, you know what? We don't need that anymore. We're just going to go Big Ten against Pac-8. And it's been that way for a long time. Nathan Winters says, what were some of the recruiting differences between the old staff and the new staff? Thanks for all you do, Jim. Just traveled from Georgia to Charlevoix to visit family. Charlevoix, good for you. Beautiful place up there, eh? Lake Charlevoix. There's some walleye in Lake Charlevoix. That's Conondite country right there. Biggest differences. There's a lot of them. The new staff, they go about evaluating, from what I've seen, they go about getting their evaluation. They evaluate more players earlier and get that evaluation done, and the scholarship offers come out quickly, and they establish relationships quicker. And they do it from coast to coast. But Tucker, for the first time this week at Media Days, said that they look at the state of Michigan first and go out from there, which is what Dantonio always used to say. And then if they didn't get a player in this radius, they looked a little further. And then they finally got around to maybe Georgia, Texas, or whatever. This staff, they may do it that way, but boom, they're out there quicker. Watching film, making evaluations. These are our guys. So the recruiting is more aggressive early. And then once they get into recruiting, I think there's more people on staff that are recruiting 100 miles an hour. In the previous staff, there were 2 or 3 or 4 guys that weren't quite keeping pace with recruiting. And there were 2 or 3 other assistant coaches that were doing most of the recruiting. And now it's more of sharing a lot of the work, and I think that's more effective. Now you're also seeing the new staff is doing more dynamic things with the bells and whistles, more support staff with the graphics and the creative aspect of it, which is the front porch of recruiting, is social media. Dantonio won a lot of games, was great, but they didn't really do much there. Tucker's done more, and he came in from day one and said he wanted to do more. That's the way it was done at Georgia. There's more support staff. The on-campus recruiting staff. Lisa B., Ben Chaim, I think is how she pronounces her name. Saw her today. I've never met her. But, man, she's working hard, and everybody that is exposed to her says great things about her, whether it's recruits or assistant coaches or whatever. So support staff, there's just more boots on the ground. There's more. It's a larger army, more mobilization. Will that result in better recruiting? Hey, Dantonio won a lot of games, and it didn't matter what the recruiting rankings said. For instance, when he went out and got a 3-star Ohio defensive back, I always said just add another star. Because if he's a 3-star DB, like Angelo Gross, 4. Bank it. That's what I said when they signed Gross. And I looked at the film. I'm like, why is this guy not a 4-star? Well, this staff went out and got A.J. Kirk. I think he's a 4-star. I'm hearing good things about Gravely coming out of Glenville. I thought his film was okay, but I've been hearing even better things about him. But anyway, so Dantonio did a great job. You guys all know that, winningest coach in history. Did some amazing things. When they had that run, when they were 35-5 or whatever it was, the program was operating at close to 99% potential, which is very hard to do. Very few programs are out there operating at 99% potential. Alabama is, Clemson is. Anyone else? Ohio State's not. I mean, they're close, but they're not at 100% potential of what they can be. Michigan State was close to it during that juncture. So Dantonio was great. I'm not saying he wasn't. Did it his way. So recruiting-wise, Tucker, he says, hey, good players make good coaches. Great players make great coaches. He's planning to win and keep winning and build on that and put together a roster that can play with those teams. That's his plan. We'll have to wait and see if he can get there, but that's what he's trying to do. Gavin Keene says, any news on Ricky White? Ricky White's on the roster. I'm not saying that he's reinstated because I'm not sure he was ever suspended. I don't know what went on there. There was some double secret stuff going on. I don't know. But he's back. He's on the roster. Dakota Vandentorn. How many circles has Sankey ran around Warren by now? A couple. Dakota Vandentorn says, would be great to get UCLA, USC, Oregon, and maybe Washington. I don't disagree. I'm not sure I'd be all pumped up about that. And does the Pac-12 cease to exist? The Pac-12... I wouldn't like that. But if that's what the Big Ten has to do for its members to get a paycheck like the Southern schools, if you're a Michigan State fan, that might be what you want, what you need to have happen. Me, I kind of like the Pac-12 being the Pac-12 and being there. But so if you only get those 4, what happens to Arizona State? If they join in with the remnants of the Big 12, what happens to Washington State? What happens to Oregon State? They in there too? I don't know. None of that's good. Happens to Utah. None of that's ideal. But for the Big Ten to be strong, those would be the 4. Plus maybe Colorado to be contiguous. I know. Then do you leap over Utah? Or I don't know. Is contiguous still important? It was for the Big Ten back when they first, when they first were looking schools to add in addition to Penn State. But I don't know. MSU Spartan says pumpkin seeds are sunfish. Well, isn't a bluegill a sunfish? They're similar, right? Chad Fryhype. That's my man Chad. He says at LECC in Ontario, enjoying the show here on the shores of Lake Erie. Chad! My peoples! Chad's my man. Very good friend. One of my best friends. You guys still up at 11:45? He's with very good friends of mine and my wife and the kids. They're over in Canada in Canada. As a lot of you guys know, we go to Canada maybe 3 weekends a month out of this summer. Couldn't do it last year. Have not been able to do it all this summer. This was the first weekend the wife and kids were able to go over there. They've been doing a lot of work over there. And I miss them. And but I tell you what, with them out of the house and no baseball this weekend, I was able to get some work done, go down to Indianapolis, watch some basketball, come back here, stream some basketball, paid the $20 to watch Shoot play today. He did a good job. Went over to football camp, watched that, saw Tucker, saw Barnett, talked with them a little bit, talked with some other guys, saw, who else? Anyway, got some work done. But I was able to do this, but now it's about midnight, and I gotta freshen up a little bit and write some stuff. I need to write some stuff about Shoot, Trout, something about football camp maybe, and there's still stories that we have to write left over from Indianapolis. Might get on that tomorrow. We'll have to wait and see. So Chad at LECC Ontario enjoying the show here on the shores of Lake Erie. That's the Canadian shore of Lake Erie. That's the North Shore. It's a wonderful place. I miss those people. So I'm a little embarrassed that they're watching. I don't know if they're still watching. Anyway, Hayden D. Roberts says, hey, Comp. Hey, D. Roberts has just tuned in. Hey, D. Roberts says, I'm sorry, detention. That's right. If you're tardy, and Hayden Roberts, let me check here. That's your fourth tardy. That is detention. Hayden Roberts, detention. Who's running detention now? Dorsey and Rico Beard. You got detention with Dorsey, Mr. Dorsey, and Mr. Beard. All right, Kenneth Roberts says, Kenny in Lake Odessa. There's some good crappie in Lake Odessa. I've not fished there before, but I've seen it on Michigan Out of Doors, especially ice fishing. Lake Odessa. Kenny in Lake Odessa says, who will have the best performance for fusing in a single game, do you believe? Fusing. I'm not sure I know what fusing is. Rushing, I think he means. I'm excited to watch Kenneth Walker III and hoping that this line will progress. I think the line will progress. Who will have the best performance for rushing in a single game? I think it's going to be Kenny Walker, and I think it's going to be around 175 against somebody. Detroit Spartan says, Walsh is part of Gilman's coaching tree. Okay, so Sid Gilman and Don Coryell, I think both, right? For Walsh. Walsh was with Sid Gilman, coming up with the Cincinnati Bengals. All right, good, thanks. Gilman was the forerunner of the modern pass game. Most coaches agree. No Iris says, Comp, I was impressed by Coach Tucker at Big Ten Media Day. What are your thoughts on how he got his message across? He does remind me of Saban in some ways. There's a lot of Sabanisms in what he says. And it's not just what he says, it's how he says it, but more importantly, it's how he believes it and how he wants to carry things out. The attention to detail, sense of urgency, those things he talks about. When he talks about the aggregation of marginal gains, that's a new one that Saban throws out there now that he didn't use when he was at Michigan State. And, Tucker, a lot of Sabanisms, but more importantly, he can identify on film or on the practice field and implement that level of quality control. Quality control is what it's all about. Izzo's a great coach. He's had a lot of assistants that have gone on and coached elsewhere and had mediocre success. They've got a lot of Izzo in their playbooks and in their minds, but Izzo is the guy who handles the quality control. You can run the same play that Izzo runs, but he'll watch it in practice in November and see what's wrong with it, what needs to get fixed before it ever gets on the court on game day. Quality control. That'll be the test for Tucker to see whether, he's got all the Saban concepts. He's a salesperson. The micro, the macro, the X's and O's, all those things. I think he's excellent. I think his resume is great. I think he's a dynamic personality. I like him. I think he's got a chance to be great. What's going to determine it is that level of quality control. Can he take all that knowledge that he has and what he's seen from other people, his mentors and so forth, and plug it in and get rid of the mistakes? That's what Dantonio did real well. I mean, the quality control was at a high level when he was here. The blocking, the tackling, it wasn't always real fancy, but made very few mistakes. And, he's only coached 7 games here, but something that is a good indicator of good quality control on his behalf. When you watch the spring game, They were doing that tempo, and they're not going to be a tempo team. They're not going to be like Chip Kelly, Oregon. They're not going to. They'll have that in, and they'll do it once in a while, the up tempo style of offense. But in practice, spring game, it was high tempo. It was variation, and it wasn't the same formation over and over. It was different formations, different motions, different plays, different route combinations. Play. Scripted, I guess, but bam, you saw it if you were watching on TV. And you would have gotten a greater sense for it if you were there watching it live. It was snap, boom, 11 seconds later, snap, boom, 11 seconds later, snap, boom. That's one thing a lot of teams play that way. Michigan State's not going to play that way a lot. But they're playing that way. They practiced it that way. That's a Saban concept. He wants the practice to be harder than the game. Michigan State's not there yet, but that's part of it. And this is the part I'm getting at. It was play, snap, boom, 11 seconds. Play, snap, boom, 11 seconds. Play, snap, boom, 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 boom. They did it. It was the 15th practice of the spring. You get 14 practices to prep for that. You've had 1 or 2 half scrimmages. They did that. Boom, 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 boom. And they never had a problem with guys getting lined up. False starts. Isaiah had 1 false start. But in terms of the offense, execution, quality control, that's an example of quality control. They were running. They were doing their, and you talk to the players, they like what's going on in the weight room and the way, just the whole operation of things. Remains to be seen if the quality control ends up being that sharp. Dantonio had it. Izzo has it. That'll be the determinant. Test. Okay, this is when I lost with sound issues the second time. Spartan Mag says, I'm not sure why that's me. Brian B. laughing out loud. Makes it more exciting. Got it back on. Can you hear me this way? Get those super chat donations in, fellas. Thank you. Bjorn Charlie says, yeah. Doors Fan 91 says, yes, we can hear. Noah Sprunger, Little Loud Comp. Super sticker, 99 cents from my man, Spartan MD. Thank you. Appreciate that. Nathan Winters, TCU, Wisconsin was J.J. Watt versus A.J. Dalton. Okay. Dalton was the quarterback at TCU. Spartan MD says, $1 for the tip jar. Thank you. Kenneth Roberts says, yes, we can. Old Tuck says, still in Ludington. So you're still in Ludington. Good. Have a great time up there. Up north is beautiful right now. Eric Iverson says, it's probably a cable, brother. Get a new XLR. I know. I've got 2 of them, and it is probably the cable, and I got to check my other one. Might run a test tonight at about 4 a.m. Some of you guys have caught me live on this channel testing things at 4 a.m., and you know who you are. Old Tuck says, day 10 up north, 27-pounder was largest king. 27-pound king salmon by Old Tuck, offshore Ludington, Michigan. That's like this. We need to see a picture of that. What were you, spoons? You got your planer boards out with spoons? Chartreuse? What color? You're doing spoons? Threw them back. So you got the 27-pound king and threw it back? Sometimes those salmon are pretty beaten up, but you're getting them out of the lake. You're not getting them at the river when they're all beaten up. Threw back the bass he's talking about. Hamlin Lake for the other fish. So the Hamlin Lake was perch, right? And the walleye and the bass. Okay. Spartan MD says, bring back the stunt 4-3 with Sam, Mike, and Will. Well, that was the best way to stop the run back in the 1980s. And I think we've seen some 4-3. I don't know about stunt 4-3. Who was it that was, I mean, the stuff comes full circle, and I think we were seeing some 4-3 out of Alabama last year. And I'm talking an over and under 4-3 with the Sam up on the line of scrimmage. Like TJ Turner. Who else was, did I see a stunt 4-3 from somebody? All right, Peyton Fleetmeyer says, let's just go ahead and win the Big Ten this year. Rob South says it's good now. Nathan Winters. Heard anything about Kyle King? He's the guy I'd love to see at defensive tackle, defensive end. Kyle King, I like that kid a lot coming out of Indiana. He was my dark horse in that class, and I was a little disappointed that he didn't dress last year, so my prediction was not so good. And Pietrowski I thought was okay at linebacker, moved to defensive end, and he's been a guy that's made a splash at defensive end. The splash that Pietrowski's making, I thought Kyle King was going to make. Kyle King's gotten bigger, moved inside. But when he was at Indiana in high school, he was a defensive end that did have an ability to turn the corner, some hip flexibility, ankle flexibility. So King, I like King. Didn't see him at all last fall. Starting to hear better things about him, or starting to hear the beginnings of some things about him now. And like I said, the Michigan State, the program, tweeted out about 10 hours ago that he was Student Athlete of the Week or the month or something like that. And I don't remember them handing that out previously. Maybe that's something they'll start to do. But Kyle King got an attaboy for that. Haven't seen him on the field yet, though. Matt Horner says, will Kalen Gervin start at corner, or will the transfer portal additions push him out? That is a great question, one of the great questions of August. I was going to ask Harlan Barnett that today, but we were just I didn't want to ask him anything too pointed. Frankly, it was the first time I'd seen Harlan face-to-face since he left for Florida State after the 2015 season. Last year, he was coaching at Michigan State, did a couple interviews, but they were all on Zoom. And I'd seen him at camp earlier in the summer, but I didn't talk to him. Today I've talked to him. It's a guy that, professionally I've known since 06, 07. He was on the team in the 80s when I was at the State News. Covered him a little bit then, but he was going out and I was kind of coming in. So really good to see him as a human being today. Good to see him out there at camp and talk with him. We talked a little bit about this and that, but I didn't ask him specifically about that. Also, it did cross my mind to ask that, if you want to know the truth. I thought about asking him that. But Thomas Wilcher was standing right there. And Thomas was smiling and having a good time, and he's happy to be here. I did talk to him a little bit, and he was like, man, I said, hey, a lot of people are pretty excited about you being here. There's a lot of buzz about that. He says, yeah, I've been hearing a lot of that. He says, I'm surprised. A lot of people making a big deal out of it about that. I'm just a coach out here, just having fun. So he had a lot of good, humble things to say. Thomas Wilcher did, but he was standing there when I was talking to Harlan. And Kalen Gervin is a Wilcher guy. I didn't ask. If I were a better reporter, didn't care about hurting people's feelings, I would have asked. But I'm not that good of a reporter. But you're asking, will Gervin start at corner, or will the transfer portal additions push him aside? Great question. Gervin, all I can say is Gervin needs to be better than he has. Gervin needs to be better than he has. And all I can say is the 4 corner backs that they brought in, I got to believe they're hoping at least 3 of them are better than what Gervin has been. My guess is the transfers are going to start eventually. Maybe Gervin begins the year starting, but he's got to get better. My guess is eventually it's going to be 2 of the transfers. And I am guilty of unknown is undefeated on that because I've not seen those guys play. I watched them a little bit here and there. The Florida guy, I've seen him a little bit. They've got framed. I'm just going by Gervin. Gervin's got to be better. We know that, right? Good kid. Wish him the best. Steve L says, good stuff, Comp. Thank you. Spartion 6686 says, loving this. Keep it going with the details. That's what I was talking about, the offensive line crap. Gordon Tenona says, sometimes too many details. Sorry, Gordon. Probably right. You probably speak for a lot of people. But sometimes I don't know when to shut up. But sometimes I want to let you know that I've researched it. I'm not just throwing crap out there. Jim McCarthy says, ha, synchronized skateboarding. Doors Fan 91 says, do you see the Big Ten going back to 8 conference games in the future? No, because they need 9. The reason to have gone with 8 is it helps you get in the playoff, but now that the playoff is expanded, you go with 9. You'll stay with 9. The reason the Big Ten wants 9, it's not the coaches. It's the administrators, it's the ADs. 9 conference games gives them an extra conference game to put on the Big Ten Network or ESPN, so you get a bigger. One of the secrets why the Big Ten TV contract is better than the SEC's currently is because the Big Ten has 9 conference games, SEC has 8, so there's more inventory in the Big Ten. There's more stock on the shelves, so they'll keep more stock on the shelves by remaining with 9 conference games. Troy Spartan says, so true, Comp. Thanks, I'll take it, but that was about an hour ago. I'm not sure what you agreed with. Matt Horner says, how much do we pay the non-conference MAC schools to come to East Lansing to play us, and how much do we take in on a Saturday game day? I think the going rate is right around $1 million or $1.1 million for a MAC team. That can vary a little bit, but I think that's kind of what it's up to. And how much do we take in on a game day? Gosh, I don't know. You look at the football budget or what the football brought in. What do they bring? What's the check for the Big Ten and everything? Whatever that is, that's the TV. I don't know. Divide that by 7 home games. I'm guessing $10 million a game. That'd be $70 million. But TV is $60 by itself, right? The ticket sales is another, I don't know, probably $15 million a game on Saturday, a day. I'm not sure. I should know that, but I don't. But it's not as much as some schools because Michigan State football and Michigan State athletics does not take money, does not receive money for parking and concessions. That goes to the general fund, that goes to the university. Most other places, University of Wisconsin, other places, parking and concessions, they get it. So they get it like the football program gets it, the athletic department gets it. So Michigan State doesn't get some of that money. And I don't think that's going to change. I've heard Greg Ianni talk about that a little bit. He's no longer working at Michigan State, but he says that that's something they've battled about in the past. But there's some things that the university does not relinquish. And does it hurt the athletic department a little bit? Yeah. Compared to the peers, yes. But is that something that's built that way by the board and the president and the administrators, just so that the athletic department is reminded that this is a university? This is not a sports franchise with a school attached to it. This is a university, an institution of higher education, the nation's premier land-grant institution that has an athletic department attached to it. The tail does not wag the dog. So I think that that's just an uncomfortable reminder. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Yeah, you're a Michigan State guy. You'd like for them to get as much money as they can. I see that. I understand that. I also like the school that I went to, and this has nothing to do with green and white and all that crap. This has to do with the university, Michigan State University. I like for the university for it not to be a tail wags the dog institution like some of the other football factories that we see. That's just me. You may disagree. Stephen Iliff says, is the Wiltshire hire going to help recruiting? Tucker, yeah, I think it will. And Wiltshire was working some younger guys today. I've asked some other people in Detroit. They're like, I'm not so sure. But, yeah, I think it will. Ryan 2985 says, the Mississippi State podcast? My bad. Detroit Spartan says, the Wiltshire hire will help Detroit recruiting without a doubt. Detroit Spartan says, he's a universally respected in and around Detroit high school football. Sparty 686 says, hell yeah. Detroit Spartan says 100. Sparty on 6686 says, still up. Let's go another 2.5 hours. Detroit Spartan says, Walsh is connected to Gilman via the Raiders and Al Davis. All right, guys. It's been 3 hours. That sets a new indoor record for Spartan Mag Live. I got work to do. It's midnight. Work to do, SpartanMag.com. I'm going to try to get a couple things done. I'm going to try to get the shoot article and the trout article. We'll see. But anyway, hey, thanks to everybody tuning in. Old Sabo Fly Shop, located just off I-75. They are not a sponsor. I just enjoy the place. Good to see everybody. Be safe. Check your notifications. We might be back here on Monday night to do it over again, open the phone lines. Maybe some jerky boys will call in. We're going to try to keep a lid on that. Unless I don't get enough work done today, I'll have to do it tomorrow. We'll have to wait and see, but I appreciate all the interest. Appreciate all the support. All the Michigan State fans out there, the Maggers. If you're curious about all this crap, go to SpartanMag.com, become a subscriber. Give us a thumbs up right here. Become a subscriber to this website. Go to SpartanMag.com. Try it for a month. You'll like it. Football season's coming. Place to be is SpartanMag.com. My name's Comparoni. Konadike's over there. Sprunger's over there. Killip's over there. Jordan's over there. Rico Beard even shows up once in a while. Matt Dorsey's showing up. Still hanging around. Chicken Coop. Could pull John Cena on us one day. It's good to see everybody. Take care. Have a great Sunday night. Sunday night's over. Have a great week and a great rest of your July, but we will see you soon. SpartanMag.com.